Double checking sound again.
Can you hear us, David?
Yeah, kind of faint.
Oh, really? How about if we're close to the microphone like we're supposed to be? Is that better?
Yeah, yeah, much better, but still a little
Okay.
faint. I've got my volume turned up to 100%, so
How about this? Can you hear me, Dave?
a little better. Yeah. Thank you.
get started, everybody. Good evening. I wanted to call the Monday, July 7th council work session to order. I'll start with roll call, please. Cindy?
Certainly, Mayor. Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Downs?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder virtually?
Here.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
Mayor Hardy?
Here.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we need to read Dave in. Dave, can you identify your reasons for electronic participation and your location tonight?
Yes, thank you very much. For medical reasons, I've had several surgeries recently. I'm recovering well. The only impact is that it reduces my ability to attend long in-person meetings. I want to thank you, colleagues and citizens, and I fully expect to be back to normal by the end of the summer. So thank you for allowing me to participate virtually.
From home, are you in Falls Church?
Dave, are you in Falls Church?
Yes, I am at home.
Great. I move that the city council approve electronic participation by Councilmember Snyder for this meeting for medical reasons pursuant to the city council's adopted policy.
I'll second.
Ms. Underhill in the second. Call roll, please.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Ms. Hiscott?
Yes.
And Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes, Mayor.
Great. Dave, we wish you continued
Thank you.
recovery.
Thank you.
So everyone, hopefully you enjoyed your 2 weeks off. I guess for the public, for your benefit, we have not taken a traditional August recess. What we've been doing is we had 2 meetings in June, we'll have 2 meetings in July, and 2 meetings in August, and we'll have 2 weeks break in between. So we're trying something different this summer, so I hope everyone has enjoyed the 2 weeks. But before we start, actually, Debbie reminded me that while we are in recess, that there was the tragic and horrific political violence in Minnesota, so I wanted to take a moment to reemphasize again that we really stand in solidarity with those affected in Minnesota and really reaffirm our commitment to civil political discourse and debate, which is really at the heart of the democratic process. So it's a reminder that democracy depends on all of us to have dialogue over division, and work sessions and public comment is a great example of that. So with that, I thought we should get started. Wyatt.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor, members of council. The first item on the agenda tonight is an update for the City Council of the Greening of Lincoln Avenue project. The request tonight is just to have a discussion about the project, receive information on the project, and we're not asking for any formal action on the project. As staff is advancing this project, we do want to, the council always wants to know right at the beginning, kind of where are we in the design process? And we did have a very strong window of opportunity for public comment, and that public comment did end back in an earlier phase of this project last summer. We are still processing that public input, and we want to give council an update on our progress for that. So the public comment window is closed. We are still listening, however, and as subject matter experts, our own staff are working with VDOT. We are taking the ongoing public input, and it is still informing our thinking on this. We're joined tonight by our Public Works Director, Amanda Stoutbrain, and she'll give a presentation tonight. But we also have our city engineer, Tara Puzin, here, and our project lead for this, Anthony Dudley, who is also here to answer any questions. We also have members of the Lincoln Avenue community here tonight, and we've really appreciated the deep engagement we've had on this project. This project is sort of fundamentally a infrastructure project to address stormwater and recurring flooding concerns, both on Lincoln Avenue and, very importantly, downstream of Lincoln Avenue. That was always sort of the genesis of this project. And while we're doing those core infrastructure improvements, it's also an opportunity to make improvements to the street itself. And that's where most of the public comment that we've gotten has been about. So I'll turn it over to Amanda, who will walk us through kind of where we are in the project. What we principally came to council to talk about is the fact that the costs have greatly accelerated because of the environment that we're in with tariffs and other upward cost pressures for projects like this. And so we've come up together, with some, there's some other reasons for the cost increases, and we'll describe those as well. That's a big one, though. So we have a phasing concept that we wanted to discuss with the city council, and then go forward from this conversation out to the community to explain that phasing schedule to the public. Amanda, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the slides. And I know that our team has a long history on this project. That certainly predates me. In 2022, the city began the planning phase for the stormwater and roadway improvements for this 4,000-foot Lincoln Avenue corridor between Northwest Street and the Arlington County line. This Greening of Lincoln project has remained focused on the core objectives of stormwater infrastructure improvements, roadway rehabilitation, and enhanced pedestrian safety. As Wyatt mentioned, there's been a lot of public interest and engagement with the project. Staff hosted a series of public meetings and walking tours in 2024. And remember that this project will modernize our infrastructure, making it more resilient and safer. And we're looking forward to advancing this phased approach to deliver the project. Next slide, please. So the last time that DPW, go back one. Thank you. The last time DPW updated council was in September 2024, when we provided a cost estimate for the entire project of $11 million. In December 2024, we received the 60% design from the consultant. And then as of this spring, 2025, the project cost estimate for the entire project has increased to approximately $20 million, primarily due to two factors. The deteriorated road subbase, our kind of field assessments have revealed more extensive roadway subbase replacement than originally anticipated, and that's a key part of this infrastructure. Also, the rising construction costs and market volatility. The project cost estimates, there's escalating unit prices, market uncertainty. We want to make sure that we have enough contingency baked into the project when we go out for construction to account for all of that. So as a result, the current funding is insufficient to complete the entire project from West Street to the city line as envisioned. But to move forward, we've developed a phased approach to project delivery that we're going to talk through now. Next slide. So Phase A refers to the Lincoln Avenue priority stormwater infrastructure, which would prioritize those most critical needs. This phase is fully funded with $4 million in state ARPA funds, which must be spent by December 31st, 2026, this phase. Our city's subject matter experts are currently reviewing the 60% plans, providing feedback to the design team, and we expect this project will move forward through design and right-of-way into procurement this year, targeting a construction start in early 2026 with an approximate 6-month duration. And this phase will result in the modern stormwater infrastructure to really address flooding. Next slide is Phase B, which refers to the stormwater and roadway project from Northwest Street to Greenwich Street, that green line on the map. This section shares many of the deficiencies present throughout the corridor, but is further burdened by recurrent flooding that cannot be addressed without roadway reconstruction. So due to the urgency of the stormwater issues in this segment, staff are prioritizing this segment. This phase, Phase B, is fully funded with $5.1 million in state stormwater local assistance funds, or SLAF funds, and VDOT revenue sharing funds. You'll note that there is an additional local allocation of $950,000 that was budgeted for this project and will remain with this project to either be used for the safe streets improvements that I'll be discussing shortly, or if needed for contingency for phases A or B, or towards a local match for phases C or D. For this phase, we're moving forward with design review, right-of-way phase, and procurement, targeting construction start mid-2026 with approximately 6-month duration. Next slide, please, is also Phase B. Continuing, this work will provide many benefits to the corridor, including a full roadbed reconstruction with new pavement and major drainage improvements, also adding curb extensions at intersections and ADA-compliant sidewalks and ramps on the south side of the street. So much of the south side, the parking will be removed and sidewalks will be added. Okay, so slide 6 is Phase C, from Greenwich Street to Meridian Street, and Phase D from Meridian Street to Yucatan Street. So these segments, the yellow and the red line, were defined based on watershed boundaries and roadway grades. So these could be implemented independently. However, these phases are not currently unfunded, and so we're pausing design review on these phases. We're actively pursuing grant opportunities, which would require a local match, and these segments will be evaluated as part of CIPs in coming years, phases C and D. Could you go back to slide 4 for a minute, please? This one. So this one, I want to talk for just a moment here about slide B, the one with the green line. And I would like to address here the status of the design review, following up what Wyatt was saying. For phases A and B, the city's subject matter experts in transportation engineering, transportation planning, stormwater, civil engineering, urban forestry, and other disciplines are continuing to review the 60% plans. As part of that process, they're reviewing public comments that have been received and looking at best practices in street design and context-sensitive solutions for the street. Design comments will be incorporated into the 90 and 100% design plans from the consultant team and will move forward with the right-of-way procurement and construction phases. 2 more points here about public input. First, the project team will continue to communicate directly with residents regarding specific property impacts. We're currently engaging with individual property owners about proposed work affecting their frontage. When a concern arises, such as a conflict with an entrance or a street sign or a certain preference about landscaping, we make adjustments to the plans and specifications where feasible to accommodate them. And second, after extensive engagement last year, the public comment window closed in May 2024. We have a matrix summarizing comments received at meetings and in emails and comments submitted via an online comment form. As our staff of subject matter experts is reviewing the plans, they're referring to these public comments and incorporating them where possible. For example, our team has been reviewing the cross sections of the corridor, and we're looking into implementing 10-foot travel lanes rather than 11-foot travel lanes in Phase B, which is the green line. Now, if you can go back to slide 7, I'll keep moving forward. Thank you. Great. So this phased approach I've discussed presents an opportunity to implement some quick build or light solutions improvements in that Greenwich to Yucatan Street section of the corridor. DPW and planning staff are coordinating with a current neighborhood traffic calming investigation on Great Falls Street to design some light solution safety improvements at the Lincoln and Great Falls intersection or the Great Falls between Lincoln Avenue and the W.O.D. Trail. We don't have specifics on that yet. We're just starting to talk about what those might look like. Staff are also exploring using paint and flex posts to implement some of the portions of the design for the Greenwich and Yucatan section, such as some curb extensions. So again, we haven't designed this out yet, but there are opportunities for some of these kind of light solutions to be implemented in the short term. So we're reviewing data and developing those designs and plan to have community engagement later this year with implementation next year. And then the last slide, in summary, here's the construction and funding status of this phased approach to the Greening of Lincoln project. So given the significant flooding issues on the corridor, DPW is looking forward to moving forward with phases A and B, which will deliver priority stormwater infrastructure and upgraded and safe transportation infrastructure, bringing them to construction in 2026. So I'm joined by a few DPW colleagues in person and online, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that report. I know we probably have, so in full disclosure, I think at office hours this month and last month, we received public comment. We received a number of public comments. So I know that council will probably want to take the opportunity to dive into that. But before we jump into the specifics, I thought we should talk about the phasing recommendations first, and then we can get into the design considerations, if that might make sense to dissect the conversation that way. So let's talk about the phasing plan, I guess, given that you have the summary slide. So I'll open it up to council for input on the 4 phases as recommended by staff.
This is just another timing question. Previously, on one of the earlier slides, you said the public comment window closed in May of 2024. However, we've continued to receive public comments. How are they being incorporated? Is it another window? Or are they just incorporated as is?
So I think in one respect, when we have to think about fairness to the public, we had a very well-communicated public engagement strategy. People showed up. And for those who did show up, I think in fairness to them, they were not expecting that they had to keep showing up repeatedly again and again and again. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. It is not our intention to reopen sort of formally the public comment period. Naturally, in a process, there is, people still are expressing themselves, and our engineers are very thoughtful people. I think also our city engineers are very aligned philosophically with what I think everybody wants to accomplish, which is to make Lincoln Avenue a very, a safer street, a very walkable street, fully in compliance with all accessibility standards, and have it be a good street for all the people who use it, as well as a construction management plan that will make it sort of acceptable for the people who live on the street, because this construction is going to be very impactful, and so that also is very much in our minds as we're planning the execution of this project. So that's just a little bit of feedback. So when things come in, it is really our staff in coordination with our consultant design team. We're having these conversations still kind of making sure that we've got everything dialed down the way that will accomplish all the community goals that we've articulated. And then VDOT will review it, and those subject matter experts will also start to weigh in as well. Does that accurately describe it?
Yes, I think that does accurately describe what you talked, the answer.
Okay, but then, so the question, my further question though is, we had a comment window, we have a, log of the comments that came in, they're all part of this project.
That's right.
As additional comments come in, are they included in the are they incorporated into what our subject matter experts are doing? Or is there another comment log? People are spending a lot of time telling us things, and I want to make sure that those things that we're hearing are being heard and either accommodated, not accommodated, responded to. If is something happening with those, if the official window is not open?
So, one, I think the comments that we're getting are aligned with comments that we've been getting for a long time, so they're not new. And in terms of responsiveness, I think having that log with a kind of a written response to it, I think is an important part of the project. Mm-hmm. And we produced that earlier, and I think we'll be updating that as we go along. Is that accurate, sort of updating the log of public comment?
Yes, and the comments that come in now are very more directed towards specific projects. Specific properties, right? What's going to happen in front of my house? Can this move this way? Can it move that way? And those are being documented and worked out with the property owner. There are larger items or larger issues that we've had to deal with, and everybody wants to throw raised crosswalks out there. So I'll throw it out there, where that was something we wanted to look at, but and we took from the property owners or interested people. And then when we as the subject matter experts got together and sat down around the table to talk about the pros and cons of raised crosswalks and when they will work, when they won't work, in a lot of instances it was found that they wouldn't work in this particular, a number of reasons. Plowing was an issue. This street is still a snow emergency route and has to be plowed with normal equipment. So we had to take that under consideration. Another thing was really those types of raised structures shouldn't be where cars are turning, because they tend to mess up vehicles that are continuously turning across these crosswalks when they're not going straight. So those two issues alone kind of brought it to the forefront of this wouldn't necessarily help us. Maybe high visibility crosswalks like you guys just approved would be a better scenario. And then speed tables. The speed tables are acceptable for plows. They're acceptable for emergency vehicles. So all of these things, of course I didn't make up on my own. I sat around the table with a bunch of people to figure this out. So, at some point in time we have to say no, right? We have to say, this is not going to work in this particular instance, and we have to make other allowances. So I'm just giving you that as an example of these long-running can't take no for an answer type scenarios that at some point in time we have to say, no, we can't do these things.
So I'd like to put a pin on raised crosswalks. I'm sure we'll get back to that. But I guess to Bill and Mary Beth's point, I would like to see the comment matrix through the life of the project, even if we've gotten past the point to acknowledge, yes, we heard your comment, here's the explanation why, because I do think that would help for the public engagement. And I guess the second point is that when we closed the public process, it was at 30% design, which is pretty conceptual. and the details that 60% people have input on. And I think that's the crux that we've been stuck on, right? Because a lot of the details people will comment on, and I don't think people understand that, oh, your comment really was only valid at the 30% stage, 60%. Like, so we need to figure out where there is room, or be clear with the public that, no, your input was really at 30% versus at 60%. And I guess now we are at 60%. This feels, I have deja vu from Park Avenue, because we had this conversation about 60% phasing. And I guess we either need to get more details at 30% or extend the public engagement process to 60%, because that's the crux of the issue.
Right.
I would
Mayor
agree.
Hardy, if I could just jump in, I agree with you because I think it goes both ways, right? It's also taking that feedback in, but then communicating out. You know, one of the, and this is just high level comment, but one of the things at one of our office hours, a Lincoln Avenue resident came and, you know, was sort of shocked, like what was now the current plan, because that was not their understanding. And, you know, so I think it goes both ways, but I think it's not only just taking that feedback in, it's also making sure that, you know, the residents are aware of where we are in this process.
Could we talk about the phasing plan? Do other people have comments on the phasing plan before we talk into design issues?
I have just some questions on the phasing plan. So specifically, one of the phasing parts would be sort of a NTC quick build light solutions for Lincoln at Great Falls. What does that mean? Does that mean we would get funding for that from the NTC, or it would have to go through the entire NTC process, which is a very extensive process?
Sure. Well, luckily, there is already an NTC investigation on Great Falls Street from, I think, Little Falls to Lincoln. And so they've already begun collecting some data for that project. We were talking with the planners just the other day about that. So there might be some synergy with an existing NTC project, but also there's that $950,000 in local funds on this project that could potentially be used for some of this, we're calling the Safe Streets improvements.
Great. So it wouldn't necessarily have to start over from scratch for the NTC process. It could, some of the designs that we have here could potentially influence what goes forward in that plan. So it's not like
Correct.
starting, okay.
My part B to that is, while we have money, we're still constrained by the same resources we have assigned to NTC. Right, so
Well-
right now, all of them are focused on Greenway Downs, the biggest NTC project we have. Do we actually have people and capacity to take on more things in the queue?
Yes, we have staff who are looking at the design for this.
Because I'd hate for them to get in line and then have to wait behind all the other NTC projects, knowing that we're trying to deliver Greenway Downs too. Okay, sorry, please continue.
No, that's helpful. In terms of this phasing process, right now, we say we have 60% design. What's going to happen is that Part A is going to advance to 100% design. Part B is also going to advance to 100% design, I guess, by the end of the year. And then Part C and D won't necessarily advance to 100% design anytime soon. So in terms of C and D, there is, I guess, more time for tweaks or changes or, I guess, moving things around. And I guess also if we're doing a light solutions build out there, then there's also more room for flexibility in terms of moving things around a little bit.
But potentially, I guess I would also say in all of this, we want to keep in mind the costs of projects, which is one of the real reason why we're doing this phased approach is that the cost kept ballooning on this project. So as we think about phases C and D, we don't want to just keep throwing more and more things into the project. So we want to make sure that we're focused on the stormwater infrastructure and the key roadway infrastructure, as well as, of course, safety treatments.
Would, so I was looking at the, there's a missing links sidewalk list, and some of this area somewhat overlaps with missing links. Is there a cost savings if missing links were to be included in this project, given that we're already going to have construction crews out there, we're already going to have people digging up the street already?
I think we could look into that with where the missing links are and have a conversation, depending on what phase it falls into and where we're at. But that's a really good point. Like, we'll cross-check and see what we can do. And obviously, if it's something where we can pick it up, we would. I think there's already some that are being picked up by the project, or at least we've talked about it.
Yes, there are some areas we had planned a new sidewalk from Lincoln Avenue to the WNOD on Great Falls. We also planned another one up on Yucatan, to tie into an existing on Yucatan. We stayed away from the others just because it was kind of outside the scope of what we were doing and the money that we had. So there would be possibly more right-of-way costs. We'd have to let residents know that that's what's going to happen, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
I guess you're talking about, there's only really one place on the project that has like a missing link, I guess you could say, and it's just east of not Yucatan, but east of Walden Court. Walden Court Park kind of goes and it just stops. So
There's that one, and then there's one at, oh my goodness, it's at Oak Street, right near the American Legion.
yeah, I think that had actually planned to with the construction that we were doing around the American Legion, we had actually planned that project.
We do plan one going down to the WNOD trail. I just want to make sure that that
Yeah,
was.
there's existing sidewalk there now.
Oh, I'm talking, so actually, at the American Legion, there's a desire path. There's no sidewalk from Lincoln down to the WNOD trail.
Okay,
On that side.
I'll take a look at it. But again, the focus really was to,
I know. This is where, we're facing some problems of mission creep, potentially where things get expanded. But then on the other hand, this is something that we are planning to do anyway, and it could potentially save taxpayer dollars in the long run, then I think it would be a wise investment now rather than.
I think that would be fine.
And I mean, also, I think there are a few sidewalk chunks beyond that. But I think that's all I had in terms of phasing. I can let other people go. I might have another question though.
Aaron, and then I've got Dave.
Thank you. So I have a few phasing questions. I think they're mostly cost-related questions, since the costs are sort of driving the phasing here. I think in my mind, kind of in September, when we were at $11 million, I was comparing it to what is it, like a $13 million Great Streets project, and I was thinking like, gosh, it's costing $13 million to get things undergrounded in Great Streets, and maybe that's what it costs, but it seems like for how expensive all this is like a bargain to get this much of greening of Lincoln done for like $11 million with the amount of improvements we were kind of thinking about. So I would just like to understand sort of and we're in a completely different environment than we were, right, in terms of construction costs and contingencies, and I get all of that, but I would like to understand in the breakdown of the condition of the road bed versus the increased contingency, kind of where the percentage kind of drivers are in terms of cost increases, because I do think that it's important for like thinking about infrastructure as we go forward throughout the city. Are our paving and road bed reconstruction going to be like really piling on costs in an environment in which we're not going to have the same level of like federal funding or flow through state funding coming to the city? And so I have like kind of a macro question just about, of the two cost drivers that have gotten this from 11 million to 20 million, like what is sort of the percentage or the proportion of what is driving that between the roadbed issue and the construction contingency issue?
Roughly speaking, the roadbed component of that was about $4 million total, right? The contingency was less than that. It was about $3 million total. So, but you know what? I shouldn't really. I should go back and consult my notes before I give you that answer. But I can provide that answer. I can give you the breakdown.
Yeah,
on a
I would just appreciate it, because I think it's important as we're thinking about all the sort of infrastructure issues we're regularly talking about, just in terms of what this looks like both on Lincoln Avenue and going forward. And then I also had a question just about the phasing and the 950,000, because I don't necessarily support putting it into neighborhood traffic calming. Like, I think that if we have done designs or we have community input and we have a sense of what it is we need and what we would have done had we had the money. I would rather like make an executive decision or give you council direction to kind of do that than have it go through a prolonged neighborhood traffic calming, exercise.
Yeah, and I think we're still trying to figure out what the safe streets improvements piece. Maybe I'm mixing a little apples and oranges. There is neighborhood traffic calming money and program around the Great Falls Lincoln intersection, but there's also this other $950,000, and which is probably more. Don't need all of that necessarily. Looking at I'm getting mixed up here. The Greenwich to Yucatan section, and looking at possibly using some paint and post kind of lower cost implementation of this design. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, doing that, just making a decision to implement some of that without necessarily going through the NTC process. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
I think the way we've been thinking about it is, looking for NTC type solutions to add into that corridor. And we've got money in a couple different pots that we could potentially implement that from. I think some of the earlier questions, or what about, going through the NTC process? I don't know that we're saying tonight that that's what we want to do, I think, but the types of things you see come out of NTC projects, I think, is what the team is suggesting we might be able to do to implement some improvements on that section of the street quicker than this giant project.
Right, and I
to
fully
deliver.
support not having to have it be its own CIP project, for example, to start getting safety, solutions implemented in the places that we know we need to do that. On the 950,000, just from the slides, it also seems like, it's like being directed to different places, and so we may need it for contingency in AB, it could be that we can use it for these things, or it could get directed to CD. And so I guess, like, realistically, do you have a best sense of, like, where the 950 is actually going to end up, or not at this point?
No, I don't think we can, because we don't have an estimate on what it would take to do those improvements, right? The softer improvements that we were talking about. So I can't say for sure, but we do know that we need a larger cushion there, contingency-wise, in order to ready ourselves for any change in the marketplace out there. So, because they're getting attacked on three. I mean, it's personnel, overseas items, you name it. The contractors are getting pretty well hit with it. So, a lot of unknowns there.
Okay, and then last big picture comment, I guess, is I had raised previously, like, whether you felt the Greening of Lincoln name for the project sort of remained appropriate, sort of over time, given where we started and sort of where we've moved to in terms of, more of the, like, stormwater infrastructure, like dealing with the road and dealing with the flooding and not seeing the greening sort of piece of it, maybe in like a larger, like, sustainability standpoint. But, like, given that we are now in a very different place conceptually from, like, what the neighborhood thought of Greening of Lincoln, I do wonder on sort of like the communicating out, if it would be better to, like, start talking about this in terms of, like, the phases of what's happening, the segmented stormwater infrastructure and paving program or whatever, rather than sort of the Greening of Lincoln project, because it's now moved so far from sort of where it was, where there are aspects of it that at this point are, like, completely unfunded, and we don't know when we're going to be able to do, like, half of what was the project.
I would say that I would still consider it the Greening of Lincoln. I'll tell you why. There's no question that we're going to do plantings and things like that out here, right? We're going to do that. But a big part of the greening component is the water quality piece that is still achievable out there. With the Phase A and Phase B, we still have two fairly large water quality best management practices put out there, one at the Legion and one in the park. We have underground detention, which reduces overall flow. We have pre-treatment devices, which takes away a lot of the grime and roadway surface out of the water column, which again is a green scenario. So it is still the greening of Lincoln. We're still getting water quality benefits out of it. I'm proud to say we'll still, there'll still be things like plantings and new trees, and we're working with the city arborists to spot where trees can go in the right way out front of people's houses, but we're also working with those people as well. So I still look at it as the greening of Lincoln. It's just a section of it. Or from a water standpoint, we got 2 out of the 3 watersheds done in that.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just wanted your kind of continued reaction to it, so I appreciate it.
Dave?
So thanks very much for the presentation and the questions so far, and I think that I share them. First of all, on the 60%, it may well be for many projects, 60% is something you can just sort of move rapidly through because you're not getting a lot of comments and things. There are really no additional reasons for taking in and looking at in more detail at public comments. In this case, the 60% warrants an extraordinary amount of communication with the citizens, first of all, to understand what their issues are, and then to be responsive as possible to those issues. So what I'm urging is a flexible approach to these quite understandable major phasings of construction projects. Again, in some cases, a 60% may be entirely almost perfunctory, and you just move on to 100%. In this case, I think considering the degree of citizen input, it's very wise that we spend some additional time to understand that. At the same time, we recognize that we're under pressure, that costs are going up each and every day, that we have fundamental infrastructure needs. So I'm not saying we slow down that part of the project. With respect to the safe streets element, that seems to be a particular area where we're getting a lot of discussion, and it's very good discussion, frankly. It suggests some additional changes over what the thinking initially was. It also raises some broader issues. For example, do we really have to have travel lanes as wide as they are? And in checking with the city attorney, in fact, the city controls our streets other than the few VDOT streets, and we have the ability to reduce travel lanes as a matter of law and therefore increase pedestrian and bike facilities. So I think that's certainly something that's emerged from this discussion that we should apply in this case and more generally. And hopefully we'll be able to both understand and use that increased flexibility for the benefit of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. I lived on Lincoln Avenue for a number of years and recognize that it is both a neighborhood street, but it's also a major cut-through street. And in fact, my visitor's car was totaled. Our car was seriously damaged one Saturday night with a vehicle that ended up on somebody's lawn 2 lawns down. So I understand the safety desires, fully understand the safety desires of everyone living around that street as it has become more and more a neighborhood street. So I also would both commit personally to work with staff for both, if there's available regional money as well as local money, to see what we can do to up the funding on this project with regard to the safe streets element. So hopefully we'll continue to do that search for what funding may be available. So those are a couple of the comments that I wanted to make. I think this is a fairly unique circumstance where 60% needs to be treated with more flexibility than perhaps 60% in other projects where there's not the significant amount of public input at that phase. So I think being flexible in that regard is something I fully support, and I think other members of council have suggested a similar thing. And I think staff is certainly beginning to respond to that. And secondly, as a general matter in this case, And I think looking at other projects around the city, we apparently do have the legal authority to reduce travel lanes and thereby free up space for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, whether it's sidewalks or bike lanes. And finally, my personal commitment, as well as working with staff to scour all possible funding sources to see what we can do to up the Safe Streets elements of this project. Thanks a lot, Madam Mayor, and thanks to all the citizens who are here and who've provided input and will provide input in the future.
Thank you. We'll also put a pin in the 11-foot versus 10-foot, because I'm sure that will merit more discussion. Do other people have phasing? Laura?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So just a question, I appreciate the phasing approach, and looking at Phase C and D, and Ms. Flynn talked about this a little bit with the, the money that might be targeted for neighborhood traffic calming. But what I wanted to ask about was, so reading the slide, so that Phase C and D, that might be a combination being funded by grants and a local match, is that right?
Could you go back, please, to 2 slides, the C and D one? Yeah, that one. Yes, I mean, I think we would anticipate that being funded the way our other infrastructure projects are funded, where we look for grant opportunities and work with the state, but those require a local match as part of that. And so
Okay.
our anticipated next step on these, it would be to evaluate them as part of our CIPs in coming years.
Okay, and so any guesstimate, are we talking like 2028, 2029, like any sort of ballpark? No?
I mean, tonight we're looking at NVTA applications for FY31.
Okay.
So that's
Right,
probably
right.
a
Okay,
good
no, that's
realistic expectation of how
Right,
far out money
right.
might be.
Okay. The reason I ask is, and I brought this up last time, there's this little, I don't think people even know it's a park, and I know Mr. Shields knows I brought this, but this trolley car park, which is almost at the border of Falls Church City and Arlington. It's at, I think, like in front of some Falls Church City homes, 319 Lincoln, and it's a little sort of park that the city is supposed to maintain. I don't think maybe could do a little better job maintaining it. But what was interesting when I was talking to this resident, and I never thought about it, was that's also the entry point to Falls Church City from Arlington and people coming off 66, and it's kind of nothing. So, I mean, I wonder when we get to Phase D, if we could talk about maybe if we could find a little money. I'm not saying one of the big, beautiful welcome to Falls Church, but maybe there's some sort of signage to say like, hey, you're entering Falls Church City, and give it a little TLC right there. So if that we could, even if it's years to come, maybe we could put that on the list.
We
Thank
talked
you.
about that with EDA.
I
too,
think that
like
had been a request, I'm sorry, I think that had been a request
Oh.
at one point in time, and we actually said, yeah, we wouldn't have any problem doing it, but that's like a 90% plan type thing. I mean, it's not something that you would see in a 60.
I do think that neighborhood gateway elements like this are effective for traffic calming, because it signals that you're entering a neighborhood versus
Slow
coming
down.
off 66. So as part of the, light solution, signage like that might be helpful, so that's a good idea. Sorry, please continue.
I guess I was just going to say that's where we talked about that several years ago and brought it up both of us a couple times this year and tied it back into some of the discussions with the Economic Development Authority about placemaking, signage. That really is, and it goes back to some of the work Justine's been doing on how you make things visually differential so people slow down and pay attention and therefore slow down on the street and all the other things you can do to make a street safer. And that should be one that's included. Thank you.
Phasing comments? Okay, I have a few. So overall, I don't love the phasing, but I understand that it's what's practical, so I appreciate staff giving us a lot of thought. To be clear, Phase C and D costs $9 million? Is that essentially how the money, because 20 minus 11 is 9, so that's how much, that's the gap funding. And I assume we've looked at all possible options, like trading the money in from other projects, and staff does not recommend any of those. Okay. Given the wave
I
storm.
should say we took a hard look at that. A lot of head scratching, some gray hair, I think. But we did look at like delaying other like Big Six projects in order to get the rest of this done. And the staff just felt like the guys that are on the Big Six had been in line for quite some time, and it wouldn't be very
Fair
fair,
for those ones either, right?
to drop those off. So yeah, those type of things were definitely looked at.
Now, I know that we're getting $9 million from the state on stormwater funding. that we finally got fixed in the last budget?
Yes.
Could any of that be applied? Or is that already dedicated?
Some of it is applied to this. $3 million is applied to, out of the $9 million, $3 million of that money is applied to this project.
And where's the other 6 of the state money?
It goes to Harrison Branch, Hillwood number 2, and Sherrill Avenue.
Okay, so that's all accounted for as part of the big 6. Got it, okay, so that's not new money. I guess second question, so given the phasing, so we're taking care of all the top stormwater needs in Phase A, and then stormwater and street safety on Phase B. Does Phase C and D have stormwater issues that we're not taking care of?
Not like Phase B would have. There are spread issues that we have to deal with essentially, because no road that you see that comes from, no historical road here in Falls Church necessarily at that time paid attention to inlet spacing and things like that. So yes, there are issues, but they're not necessarily, they're certainly not issues that would require someone to put floodgates up in front of their house or.
So not like the cute ones that we saw in like the 900 block of Lincoln in the big
Right.
storms you had, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that as we've considered this phasing, that we're not leaving kind of Greenwich to Yucatan kind of prone to more flooding by anything that we do and west to Greenwich too.
We're upgrading the backbone of the systems in those areas. So down at Walden Court, the outlet pipe will be replaced down there. It's old corrugated metal pipe, probably 66 years old, fairly close to houses, needs to be replaced before it essentially fails. And then at Lincoln Park, we're doing quite a bit of that, including, I don't know if anyone has gotten a chance to go see the manhole tree yet on the corner of Lincoln and Great Falls, but we're replacing that system as well, plus the system in the park, so.
Okay. And then on NTC, I think I will ditto a lot of the comments my colleagues made. I think none of us love the idea of Phase C and D going through NTC. We are fine with NTC-like solutions, but our expectation is that we would have resources and design already done. We don't need people to re-vote on it and to wait in the queue. So I want to make sure that's clear. Got it. Okay, so I think that's it for more phasing questions?
Couple more phasing questions that came up. For phases C and D, so this wouldn't be for the light solutions part, but for actually doing things. There were things that were taken out of the plan at some point because of costs. And so I'm just wondering are those things that could be added back into the plan, and then we could have a discussion later on, like this is too expensive. One thing that I am thinking of is like, there was a sidewalk on, this was another missing links thing, on Great Falls up to, from the WNOD up to Lincoln on the east side. And so I think small things like that maybe were removed because we were concerned about costs, but now are getting pushed out. If these are things that could be reconsidered.
For example, that sidewalk was removed not necessarily for cost. It was removed at the neighborhood's request because it was removing 3 large trees over on that side. And we did not have that issue on the west side where we could freely, build sidewalk without any kind of existing landscaping being hurt. So
There's enough space on that side though for like a bike lane or something to go there. Like, there's space in the street where that could be potentially used that won't necessarily encroach on the trees.
yes, that's in the existing pavement area.
Pavement area, okay, yeah, so could that space be potentially like a shared use path or something like that rather than, that doesn't encroach on trees and doesn't necessarily, so that could be both a bike lane and a sidewalk or something like that. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I think those are the kinds of things we would visit
Okay,
at
yeah.
some point down the road
Okay.
when we, continue design of C and D. But
Okay.
right now, we're basically saying we're going to close the books on those 2 sections, other than the NTC type things for the time
For
being.
time being, okay, perfect.
So I think that gets down to the detail that we can't give you a good answer on tonight.
Perfect, that's fine. I guess more so I was wondering, like, we could be open to looking at things as we go forward whenever C and D come back up.
Think
If-
of it
if-
almost as a new project, yes.
Gotcha. But thank you for mentioning it wasn't necessarily just cost. Let me see what else. And so that means that like at Great Falls for the light solutions, that could mean putting paint down for bike boxes and other things like that. or would that not be considered light solution?
I think potentially, yeah, our team is going to be designing some of that. so,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. That covers my phasing questions.
Okay, let's move into the design questions on, I guess, Phase A and B. Things I've heard so far is the raised crosswalks at, I guess, Oak and Greenwich. And then, because those are the only two intersections really in scope now. And then the 10-foot versus 11-foot lanes. So we could talk more about those. I'm sure we have other things on the list. So I'll open up for questions or comments on the design.
Can I just put 2 on the list? So I also have, right, narrowing the travel lanes and the raised crosswalks. And I guess to Tony, your comment about sort of the raised crosswalks not working in the intersections themselves, but whether the crosswalk should be like mid-block, right? Like the intersection should be the intersections with whatever the kind of curb extensions and movement of the sidewalks are, and overall narrowing. But then if you disentangle the intersection from the crosswalk, you know, could you potentially still have a raised crosswalk, but it's mid-block instead of at the intersection? So that kind of question. And then on those two, I just want to add the kind of comment, I think, about minimizing the straightaways versus some of the curb design, so that, you know, in the, I don't know, it might be the Phase B part of it, right? Yeah, Phase B closer to Greenwich, that where if you can curve the sidewalk that you're putting in more so that the straightaway isn't as straight as it is that sort of thing still open for
I mean, yeah,
consideration?
I mean, there's a couple of things. I was a little confused from certain comments about things being left out. But you know, we had a fairly, for example, at the intersection of Greenwich and Lincoln, we had a fairly aggressive bump out on the north side. I guess that would be the northeast corner of Greenwich, and all of that kind of comes down, you know, fairly small. I mean, with, you know, just 11 feet there, or 25 feet of curb to curb. So, I mean, those types of things it still exist. I mean, we're not taking them out or anything. I mean, we're still looking to put that kind of thing in. Chicanes, for example, another one is chicanes. We never had any chicanes in the first phase. I mean, there was nothing like that in there, because there was never enough size, enough room to do those side-to-side movements. Because you might remember, and just Councilmember Underhill, I know you remember the fact that most of the people that we've talked to, their main issue was, stay out of my front yard. Even if it's not my front yard, stay out of my front yard. And so we had those types of constraints too, that that I don't think recent comments take under consideration as we do this. So, you know, it might make some things might make one person happy, but then there's somebody else that's not going to be happy. So that has to be considered as well, I think.
So given that we're narrowing on between just West and Greenwich, and I think Aaron brought up chicanes or some sort of like curvature in the road, so it's, because we all know that straight, wide roads make people speed. Could you show us where we are adding those traffic calming devices between West and Greenwich?
We can. Essentially, all the lanes narrow down at each intersection, right? So if you're looking at Phase B, it would be at Greenwich, it would be at Oak, and it would be at Spring. All these areas narrow. Some of the roads stay narrow in those areas where we don't allow parking anymore, but then we do allow parking in other areas. So, for example, the area on the north side from, say, just 100 feet west of, or 100 or 200 feet west of Greenwich, Spring, to east of Spring, is no parking now. I mean, or is proposed no parking. I think in account, I can't remember I'll get the numbers for you for what it is here, but we pretty much reduced the parking out here by about 66%, which kind of, again, leads us to the greening issue, because we're able to reduce the amount of impervious area because of it, which is a good thing. So
other than the crossings being narrow, because we do curb extensions at each intersection, are we doing any other treatments to the road itself, like a chicane or some sort of like curving of the road?
Other than removing the parking and and keeping the road narrow at those points as well, no.
Should we?
Should, my honest opinion is no, I don't think we should. I think that chicanes are, won't, everything that gets brought up out here, once you size them down, they no longer meet their intended, objective, thank you. They don't meet their intended objective. So, chicanes, again, if you don't really turn that road, you're not really, it's just a place where people can slalom through versus actually have to slow down. Another one that comes up is the putting in a greenway, or some people call them a parkway, or a verge beside the curb to separate pedestrians from a grassy area, to separate pedestrians from the traffic. Well, in order for those things really to work, they have to be a minimum of 4 feet, right? If you're putting in a 1 foot grass median, you're just making a maintenance issue that's hard to even grow grass in. And so, honestly, when faced with that kind of decision, I'm said, well, I think I'd rather a foot of concrete there, so that people can easily use the sidewalk, versus a 1 foot or 2 foot grass median that is sat there not to meet its intended cause because it's too small. So those are some of the examples I would give.
Yeah, I guess I would just try to pivot back that there are subject matter experts, our traffic engineers and our planners and our folks are still reviewing the plans and looking at them with that critical eye, thinking about, progressive street design standards, taking into account the public comment. And so understanding that one of the goals of the project is to slow down traffic and improve, the pedestrian experience, adding this whole sidewalk on the south side and, reinforcing the crosswalks and adding the bump outs, all of those, further that goal of traffic calming. And we'll continue looking at other opportunities. I'm including, our folks can since the chicanes have been brought up in many of the comments, our subject matter folks can look at that and see whether or not that might make sense somewhere.
During office hours, I think one of the residents brought a photo of an accident where the car was hit so fast that it flipped over. And so that's scary. And so I get why living on the street, people want all the traffic calming measures possible, right? And so I would encourage us to look at the data and figure out where we do have some accidents and speeding, and do everything we can and try to, especially now that we are narrowing the scope to half the stretch of Lincoln, to do it right the first time and not have to go back and revisit and say, oh, now we actually need to do more traffic calming. Here's an opportunity to really touch the street and get it all in, now that we're not taking the eastern part of Lincoln under consideration. So let's tackle the 10 versus 11 feet wide lanes, because that's been a repeated comment we've heard. What are staff's thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe I glossed over it in my comments earlier, but yes, our team has been reviewing the cross sections of the corridor, and we're looking into implementing 10-foot travel lanes rather than 11-foot travel lanes on the corridor. And so that would be, painting them so they are 10 feet wide. And then, as we know, that if you just drop the speed limit without making some of those changes, that it doesn't necessarily slow folks down, but dropping the speed limit and narrowing to a 10-foot travel lane is something that we are strongly considering and think that we can probably accommodate.
That's great, because that should be hopefully an easy change to change behavior. I guess while you're on that, in the design documents, it calls out 25-mile speed limit is what we're designing for. Is there a reason why we're not designing for 20? Is that just a typo?
No. You generally design roads from a safety standpoint, from a driving safety standpoint, for a higher speed limit than what that speed limit actually is. The decision was made to do the design to 25 miles per hour quite early in the process, and that the speed limit itself would be 20 miles an hour. So I guess so yes, it's not a typo. It was designed to a 25 mile per hour speed limit.
Why wouldn't we design to 20 miles? Help me understand that.
Yeah, so I don't know I'm not specifically a traffic engineer, but Tony's correct that is how it is designed. And so we can get you some more information on that. There are whole manuals that talk about how your design speed is typically a bit higher than what your actual posted speed limit is. That's true for all jurisdictions designing roads throughout the whole nation. So I can get some of that information to you and provide some more information.
I guess one of my personal reservations when we dropped the speed limit across, 80% of the city was that you can post a speed limit, but people are going to drive what they're going to drive based on the way roads are designed. So I'd rather, design for 20, and that might actually force us to do additional changes to the road geometry because we are designing for 20 versus designing to a higher one, and actually being declarative in that versus, which I realize bucks kind of how traffic engineers traditionally may do it. But given that we made the move as a policy decision, say, no, we are dropping the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. The only streets left in the city that are 25 are ones that we've said, at some point when we touch them, they will drop down to 20. I guess I'd almost rather say, let's just design for 20. And maybe that will force us to think about chicanes and other things as well.
Yeah, and on this, I guess I would make a specific request, just so that we remain accountable, to the public and the concerns that we repeatedly hear. I would like to see sort of at a 20 mile per hour versus a 25 mile per hour, what are the changes that you would have to make to the roadway design to accommodate the 20 mile per hour versus the 25 mile per hour?
Yeah, that's something we can get back to you on.
So that was good news on the 10 feet, so thank you for staff for looking on that. We talked about 20 versus 25. Other design things, Justine?
Well, just, I was wondering, so we get the 10-foot lanes, would that also be 10-foot turn lanes too? Or is that something that staff's also looking at?
They would apply to Great Falls.
Oh, is that not in Phase B?
There's no turn lanes.
I think there's no turn lanes
There's
in
no, okay,
Phase B.
perfect. And that makes it easy. And then are we considering parking at 8 feet? Or I guess it would be 7 feet plus gutter, 1 foot.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, that takes care of the width stuff. I have other
Okay.
things, but
Other design questions or comments? Justine, you can keep going.
sure. I was curious about the width at Oak Street and the curb extensions. Could that be potentially narrowed to 22 feet width rather than the 30 feet that we have now?
I think that's something we'll have to look at as we're going through the design. I mean, we talked about the 10-foot lane widths, and we talked about there's curb extensions, but we'll have to look at as we go through the design.
Okay, yeah. So, I guess I would specifically.
They're at 25 feet now, though.
Oh, they're 25 feet now?
Yeah, the narrowest area, including Oak Street and everywhere, is 25 feet,
You mean the widest?
the widest.
Widest?
Well, the narrowest, so.
Okay. Oh, I see,
I don't know
okay,
how that goes, yeah.
Going across, crossing Oak Street would be at most 25 feet.
Right.
Okay. I guess if that could be brought to 22 feet for all of the intersections, I guess having more of a narrow space there.
Okay, so when we talk about,
I think we'll have our design folks look at that as they go through
Okay,
the design.
great. Other things, I'll let other people go. I have 3 more things.
Debbie?
I just had a quick question on the raised sidewalks. I know I listened and heard you say you can't do them at the intersections and the reasons why. But what about right at the park at Lincoln? I'm just thinking about where do you want the most visible crosswalk possible, where kids are walking to and from the park, but is that also the same problem with it being a snow emergency route and the appropriate equipment that couldn't cross over a raised crosswalk if we put one there? Is that the same problem?
So are you talking about, this is on Lincoln near the park?
Yeah.
So that is in
Right now,
phase-
it's just a painted crosswalk.
Phase C, not
right.
to be specific.
Sorry.
But I guess while we're talking
I was
about
just
raised-
thinking
No, but
about,
it's-
thinking about raised as
understood.
a
We'll
concept, and
consider.
is it anywhere on the street, and that's somewhere where I immediately was thinking that would be a great place to have one.
But I guess it does raise, so help me understand why we can plow speed bumps but not raise crosswalks if snow is the main concern.
all right, so these are speed tables, so they're built a little bit different than a speed bump. A speed bump is an abrupt up and down motion, just really a half circle sitting on the sidewalk, whereas a table is a gradual slope up, then it flattens out, and then it slopes back down. That way, plows can raise as they go over, and not in an abrupt sense, but have time to raise. And again, the fire trucks, which would much rather have that type of component there versus like an abrupt speed bump. So I think a lot of people think speed bump, right? So that's why we hear issues of, oh, they're noisy, they're things like that. Whereas in a speed table, it doesn't necessarily present those same types of things. And I can confess to that because of the fact that I live not 15 feet away from one in front of my yard, in front of my house, that doesn't create a lot of noise or anything like that. So that was the idea, was it was more plow friendly, more fireman friendly, and yeah.
Okay, so these are speed tables, not speed bumps, but staff does not recommend putting speed tables, i.e. raised crosswalks at crossings.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, so the speed table, so the raised crosswalk is something is also more, technically, they have an abrupt height change. They're raised off the ground, and there's no taper in front of them or anything. It's just a boom, boom, you know. So it's different than a speed table. The design is different than a speed table as well. The thing the plows and the fire trucks don't like is the abrupt change in elevation, the sudden and immediate change in elevation. That's been their issue.
Can I ask whether there's any possibility that our speed tables could function as crosswalks? Like, can the speed tables be put in the places that we would want crosswalks and mark them as crosswalks?
Yeah, I guess I'd say in general, there are a number of vertical speed control elements, right? There's speed humps and speed tables and speed cushions, and, they all have their place on different, certain functional classifications and certain types of roads and snow emergency routes. And again, this is something that we're still kind of assessing what makes sense in other parts of the city as well as on this particular corridor. And so I don't know that we have a definitive answer on that tonight, but understand that these both provide kind of slowing traffic and slowing speeds. There's also concerns about people hitting them too fast and making them loud, the pedestrian aspects. So these are, there are a number of elements to these kind of vertical
I think the
speed
third
controls that
element I
we're
would
looking
add
at.
in there,
Yep.
I think that we're hearing from the neighborhood is they would like extra visibility at crosswalks.
Okay.
And so if there's ability to combine both speed reduction and visibility in crosswalks, i.e. a raised crosswalk, that seems to meet both of those needs, or all three things that we've talked about. So that's the request we've heard, is that it's not just slowing cars down, but also raising visibility, especially with the number of people crossing Lincoln.
Okay, that's helpful clarification.
I guess I'd also like to mention that I believe on the Park Avenue project, we do have raised crosswalks, and that is a snow route. The other thing, I guess it would be specifically looking at the Greenwich crosswalk and the Oak crosswalk to see if it might be feasible there to have the raised crosswalks for Phase B specifically.
Okay. Any
Oh, yeah,
other
sure.
design?
I have three more things. There is, this is just part of Phase B. On Oak Street, as you're walking towards Greenwich on the south side, the sidewalk kind of wraps around a utility pole. Is it possible to keep the sidewalk, I guess, as rather than bringing it towards where the traffic lanes or cars are sooner, can we keep it further away from cars and traffic until it's absolutely needed to get around the utility pole? I know that's a very specific question. I don't know if that's...
We can look into that, yeah.
So that's one. And then I want to +1 the comment on, like, if there's space for trees, especially if we're narrowing the road a little bit, please keep an eye out for that. And then the final thing I have is on the chicanes. I guess as you're looking into that, I did want to flag that I think we do have a chicane at Spring Street. So in terms of the traffic calming, that is part of the Phase B. I think there is like a little bit of
Curve.
Curve jog at, around Spring Street. I believe that Arlington, includes, what is it? They have, 7-foot offsets for their, chicanes. And so, yeah, I guess 6 feet, for what we could potentially do at Greenwich Street, is probably better than
But I may need to turn it
nothing.
on. I may need to turn it on.
Nothing shorts.
Oh, fine.
Hey, Caitlin, you're not muted. We've all had that happen, it's okay.
Great. And that would be it for my list.
Other design input? Okay.
Madam Mayor, hi.
Yep.
Just 2 quick things. Definitely endorse the movement toward designing the street for 20 miles per hour. Perhaps there may be some really low-cost things we can do in the parts that won't be totally dealt with, that would help begin to lower the speeds even before we get into the sections where we're able to put most of the money. That would be point number 1. And then point number 2, so the citizens understand, this goes back to staff. So what are the expectations from going forward now?
Sure, yeah, yes, the next steps are that, as I said, they are, subject matter experts, our engineers, our planners, our urban foresters and folks are reviewing the 60% plans, and both based on their own, expertise and thinking about progressive street design, as well as taking into consideration the public comments that we've been receiving throughout the process, and are making those design comments on phases A and B at the 60% phase. That'll be incorporated into the consultant's next round of design, and we'll continue with the design process. We've also heard about the need that we have a comment log, and Tony's been maintaining very, very meticulous records, but we will update that comment log so that it expresses kind of the life of the project, and make sure that we're, showing that we have been receiving and taking in these comments, and where they've been able to be addressed. And we will, but otherwise plan to continue moving forward with the design process.
So let me just ask a follow-up question. So when will the citizens know the results of this additional dialogue? In other words, when will the public know what's going to happen, if you will, at 90%? Or
Right, we can.
That's where I'm going with the question.
Yeah, right. I think we'd plan to have an update sometime this fall about what's in the 90%. And that would be an update to share with council.
Okay, so that'll be available to the public as well to take a look at, see if there's any final comments at that point. Okay.
The thing I worry about is we're close to 90% plans at that point, and I don't want to have the same discussion that we just had between the 30 versus 60%. And so I guess I would ask that before we get to that point, could you loop back with us confirming we are going down to 10-foot lanes, that we are designing for 20 miles an hour, and what that might do to the design of the street? Like, would it add more chicanes? The consideration of pedestrian visibility, like, would we consider moving any of these to be raised crosswalks, cushions elsewhere, and zebra stripe them so that pedestrians are more visible based on, again, the experience of the residents who live there? Because I don't want to get to the fall and be like, well, we heard your comments, but we couldn't get to any of it, because I think a lot of those are really important, I think, to this council, given our focus on pedestrian safety and the speed limit reduction. So I guess I would ask before the fall, could you at least circle back and say, here's what we found, here's what the experts found?
Yeah, and I did want to circle back quickly to design speed. So one of the reasons why you would want to have the design speed be 25 is when you're thinking about sight distance requirements, the faster the design speed is, the more distance you need for your pedestrian visibility. So if we were to take a 20 mile per hour design speed, then you're going to account for that speed when you're looking at your sight lines. So we want to be very, very careful with this project, because we want to make sure that we've got great pedestrian visibility for the crosswalks, right? So that is just something, as I started to think when it originally came up, like, that's why you would want your design speed to be 25 miles per hour, but your posted speed to be 20. We can definitely look at it at the same time to make sure that we're working with the designer to have a road that really functions at 20 miles per hour, because I think that that's the goal. But we
Yes.
want to be careful because we want to make sure that we've got as much pedestrian visibility as possible in these crosswalks before we approach them.
Yeah, I think
And that's one of the points of design speed calculations.
Yeah, I think the latter is definitely the goal. Like we want the road to function, like given that we have a chance to redesign a road pretty much from scratch, that we want the road to function like a 20-mile-an-hour versus in the
yes.
past, we kind of like go back and add things to it, add, 30-mile-an-hour roads and drop the speed limit down. Justine, you were going to say something?
It's just that obviously designing for a 50-mile-an-hour road would very much change the roadway, and so I'd be curious if there were, besides pedestrian sightlines and distances there, if there were other things that would be incorporated to make it a 20-mile-an-hour road. I have a couple other things. Can I chime in? Okay.
Sure.
I did just want to thank you all for working on this. I know this has been just a monster project, and I definitely talked to Tony on days where he wanted to pull out his hair, or maybe he did pull out his hair. But yeah, just thank you for sticking with this. And I realize that the cost overruns are a bit of a punch in the gut. But like, at least from my perspective, and I think from a lot of people on council, like, even if some things do end up costing more to get this done right, then, that's a cost decision that we should make as a community. But like, at least from my perspective, I'd be willing to put a little bit more, whether it's to like, make sure the missing link gets done if that's cheaper or whatever else, to make sure that this is done right. So thank you all.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you because we appreciate, we realize we're in the details. This is a council that cares a lot about the details, but I think this comes from a place of caring about making sure that we do this right. And given the opportunity to really touch and impact this stretch of road, which we've talked about a long time, we appreciate staff listening to all the comments from us as well as the residents, so.
Right, and I would just add on, thank you to the staff. I know this is, started well before I got on council, but just supporting Ms. Underhill's comments and all of those comments that, stormwater is obviously very important, but, we continue as our city grows and we continue, that is the number one thing we hear about is pedestrian safety and speeding and all that. So I think that's why you hear that from all of us, is that, even just separate from this project, that's what we hear all across the city. So thank you very much.
I guess finally, I would just add, I think that, I totally get that it can come across as council sort of second-guessing staff and their sort of subject matter expertise. And I think that, when I hear sort of the discussions on this, to me, it sort of reflects that, like, there are gray areas and sort of staff exercising discretion and judgment. And I think that the conversation coming back to council just reiterates the importance for us of making sure that you hear from us that, like, when you're exercising that discretion and judgment, it's always, breaking in favor of sort of the pedestrian safety or the neighborhood responsiveness or the community sort of feedback. And so I think that's why, we kind of have to go through somewhat of the painful, tortured discussions, but appreciate, everyone's work and don't do it in a way to kind of take away or depreciate sort of what's gone into all of this. So thank you.
Next item on the work session agenda is a request to increase compensation, the stipend for the Planning Commission. The request tonight is to have a discussion about this, give direction to staff, and then have this on your agenda for a first reading at your next meeting on July 14th. So we'd like council direction on the stipend amount. We've given some ideas on how that could be framed. And also the effective date. We propose that it be effective September 1st. The City Council can make that decision as well. I'll turn it over to Mr. Holler, and I want to thank him for his work on this, and look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hardy, members of the City Council. I'm Jeff Holler with the planning staff. Council has requested to hold an initial work session to consider increasing annual compensation for members of the Planning Commission. On April 24th, 2025, Planning Commission Chair Andrea Colmont sent a memorandum to the City Council requesting that Council consider an increase in the compensation provided to the Planning Commission members. Virginia Code allows local governing bodies to determine and provide appropriate compensation for their Planning Commission members. The city council last adjusted the planning commission member compensation in 1990 at a rate of 100 per month for the, at 100 per month for the members and 150 per month for the chair, a total of a $9,000 per year total fiscal impact. The Planning Commission is the body which studies and recommends changes to the city's comprehensive plan and reviews many types of development applications to ensure consistency with that plan. Annually, the commission recommends a 5-year capital improvements program for key investments in city parks, infrastructure, and roadways that are called for in the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council on the preservation of historical landmarks and design of public bridges, street fixtures, and other public structures. Staff has researched adjacent localities to compare how other Planning Commission members are compensated along with their varying responsibilities assigned to them by their local zoning ordinances, which are outlined in tables 1 and 2 of the staff report. Table 3 on the staff report are suggested methodologies council may want to consider when determining a reasonable compensation for the planning commissioners. One method may consider the average of similar jurisdictions like Herndon, Leesburg, Vienna, Manassas, and Purcellville. Another suggestion is to adjust the 1990 amounts for 35 years of inflation. As I had mentioned before, the current fiscal impact of the planning commission compensation is $9,000 per year. The salaries, as staff has suggested them, would increase that impact to around $20,200 to $22,500 per year. That's it for the staff report. Do have a few members of staff here? Chime in if we need to. But thank you.
Great, thank you. Comments, Laura?
Well, I was surprised to see the last time they had a raise was when I was in college. So I just wanted some question table 1. So Arlington County and Alexandria, Manassas, so those planning commissioners, they're just volunteer, they're not given any kind of stipend. Is that right? Okay. I'll just put it out there. I'm supportive of this. I think the Planning Commission, they do great work, and it's a lot of work. And this council, the city council, really depends on the Planning Commission to give us great feedback. And as we've discussed with our own council about benefits and salary increases, I think it opens it up to maybe a more diverse pool of applicants. You know, it could be someone who, you know, maybe is an urban planner but has young children, couldn't really do it because of childcare costs, or someone with an elderly parent or something. It just helps, I think, with those kinds of situations, just having a little, you know, money in the pocket to help with that. You know, I know it is, you know, a budget cost, but, you know, looking at the 2 different scenarios on table 3, my main concern with the average of similar jurisdictions is that I don't feel comfortable paying the chair just $10 more than the members. I'm a former school board chair, and I made the same comment when we talked about our mayor's salary just a couple months ago. I do feel, you know, mayors and chairs put in a lot more work than the rest of the members. So, so for that reason, I would, I guess, more likely support the adjust for inflation, which would be $250 per month and $370 for the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Other comments? Debbie?
I think Laura articulated all of my notes really well, so I just want to +1 on Laura's comment to the reasons why pay and the reasons why the differential is important. So +1. Okay.
Mary Beth?
I'll agree with what Ms. Downs and Ms. Scott just said. However, I'm also thinking about that cost of living adjustment. And is there a way to bake that into the ordinance that as we do cost of living adjustments for staff, we also just continue to do that for planning commission?
Sorry, not.
Go ahead, where's Leesburg?
So town of Leesburg has a
Oh,
COLA
yes.
increase annually, and you'll see that they are $637 and $612 a month. presumably they have been doing that for some time, and that's why they're where
Right.
they are.
So if there was consensus in that direction, I think we would add another resolve. There's 4 resolves now. We'd add a 5th that would implement a COLA mechanism. And I don't know if the city attorney.
Yeah, I think we could do that. The importance there will be identifying which, the Washington, publishes many different, CPI. Yeah, CPIs, and some have groceries, some don't have groceries, some have, I don't know them all, but you'd want to identify with specificity which one you were using so that we would know how to calculate the COLA.
Can it just? how
Tied to
do-
the city?
Yeah. Can it just be what you do for staff? Is that
Oh,
the?
of course. That would be simpler.
Yeah.
Although,
And that is
that's, yeah, there we go.
more reflective of.
The only thing that we'd want to think through, that so staff, so if we move to a step and grade, which we don't have right now, we do it merit, there would then be a COLA, which would be one part of it in the step and grade, so the planning commission would just get the COLA component, so that's what you're proposing. Right now, we don't do that, we just do merit. So we might need to just think about that. But I think we could take a beat and we can have language that would address that.
Or we don't, I mean, that was my suggestion. I don't know what other people's consensus is. If we just
First, I want to get consensus
Yeah.
if that's the
put it
direction we want
in
to go.
or not put it in, we could, revisit it or say we're going to revisit it every 5 years and not have the COLA as a concern, just say every 5 years.
People's thoughts on that? I think it's Leesburg has a COLA built in. That's why they're at 600.
The power of compounding.
Other opinions?
I'm okay with a planning commission increase. I mean, I think that the decision of council to do council increases basically necessitates the planning commission increase, the amount that we rely on the planning commission, the, important judgments and, input that they provide to us. I don't mean this in any sort of disparaging way toward any planning commission chair, but to me, the sort of distinctions between the planning commission members and the planning commission chair are not sort of as apparent as, for example, the difference between council member and mayor, or school board members and school board chair. I think that, the planning commission takes up the chair role, as sort of the person overseeing the meeting, rotates that on a yearly basis. The planning commission, for the most part, are many of them showing up to kind of different openings and different walkthroughs and whatever else. And so I don't know that, I'm fine increasing the monthly, stipend, but I think $120 differential between the member and the chair isn't necessarily warranted, and would even it out a little bit more, maybe it's a $50 differential or something. I don't feel strongly about it, but I just wanted to, put it out there as a comment. I think, the budget impact is minimal on all of these things. I do think it still gets back to my overall concern on the council direction that we went in, and sort of seeing, this is more of a part-time position as opposed to a volunteer position, because then there are also a lot of boards and commissions where we have chairs putting in a lot of time and they're not, compensated at all. And I think the next thing that we might, be facing is also questions on what this means for the school board compensation and the budget impacts that is also going to have. So, on this, I'm fine to support it, but it's with reservations in the overall direction we have started to move in, given how we approached council compensation.
Are there any other boards or commissions that get a stipend?
The Board of
The
Equalization.
BOE? Yeah. And what is theirs?
Per meeting?
It's per meeting, and I believe it's $70, but I
Don't
can't
know the
really
amount.
remember.
Yeah,
I should-
so, okay.
Yeah. The-
EDA is not a board or commission, but I think they receive compensation.
The
do not.
EDA, no.
They do not, okay.
Just the BOE, I think, is the only one.
Well, just to follow up, Ms. Conley, on your throwing that out there about the COLA, I don't know, I think I'd rather just review it every 5 years. I mean, we're in 2025, we could just say every 5 years, 2030, we review it again. That number the Leesburg number sort of is, it's a big I mean, obviously, they've probably been doing it for a long time, but, I mean, it gives us a little more, I think, control if we just review it every 5 years.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Taking Aaron's comments into consideration, maybe we can do something in between. We're at $250 and $300 a month. So then you're $50 a month, $600 a year. That's still enough to signify leadership and recognize it without as much of a differential.
Okay,
And then we add every 5 years.
So we're at 250 and 300 revisit every 5 years. See head nod?
I would support that.
I would support that.
Yes, I would too.
Okay, I think that's the majority.
Very
Let's
good.
go with that. I guess, in general, I support it. I guess what I would ask staff to do, and maybe jurisdiction size is not the right metric, because I know we also call out like planning commission responsibilities, but like frequency meeting and complexity of work, I think matters a lot, like regardless of the size. I feel like being a nerd and having watched other people's planning commission meetings and other council meetings, we ask our planning commission to take on a whole lot. And so I want to make sure that we respect and value that work as well. So it's not just for me, especially given that Alexandria and Arlington don't compensate their planning commission members, and they are however many times bigger than we are. So all that to say, I don't think population is the best gauge to use, especially because the planning commission, unlike our own council salaries, is not tied to our population size. So that's my general comment. But thank you, Jeff, for your work on this, and thank you, council, for the discussion.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would
Oh.
agree with the direction we're moving in, and I think in the resolution, we ought to note the extraordinary responsibility that our planning commission is given under our charter. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let's move on to Broad Washington vacation easement.
All right, so this is, seems like a big deal, but in fact, the material impact of this vacation is actually quite minor and really probably not noticeable to anyone passing on the street. But as it is right now, it does present possibly a cloud on title for the Insight development at Broad and Washington. They'd like to get it cleared up, and we're happy to get it cleared up as well. Laura Arsenault has been our staff lead on this. She's also joined by a lawyer from McGuire Wood, and I forgot your name. Matt White, and he is representing Insight on this. So I'll turn it over to Laura. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Good evening. The proposal tonight is a request for an ordinance to adjust the legal location to consider a public sidewalk easement, thank you, at the 111 East Broad Street, following construction discrepancies between the approved site plan and the as-built conditions. The key actions proposed include the vacation of a 4,133 square foot portion of the previously approved sidewalk easement along East Broad and North Washington, the termination of an associated legal easement rights for that area, to approve a new 4,092 square foot sidewalk easement that matches the sidewalk's actual constructed location, and to accept the new sidewalk location and easement into the public right-of-way. The reason for the adjustment include minor deviations occurred between the planned and constructed building lines, resulting in a net loss of 41 square feet of a sidewalk easement. The deviation is minimal and has no meaningful impact on the pedestrian accessibility. Staff recommends the first reading of the ordinance on July 14th, 2025, and scheduling the public hearing and second reading on August 11th, 2025. Bit of background, the applicant 127 East Broad Street LLC requests the changes to align the legal documents with the on-ground conditions of the Broad and Washington mixed-use development, and the project includes the 7-story building with retail, including Whole Foods, the theater, Creative Cauldron, and 339 residential units with 4 levels of parking. The city approved the site plan and granted the final certificate of occupancy in December 2024. For the legal basis, the sidewalk easement must be vacated and reestablished via ordinance per Virginia Code, and city staff confirmed the vacation and dedication process is required due to the city's ownership interest in the sidewalk. There is no fiscal impacts. Thank you very much, and the applicant, Representative Matt Weinstein, is here to answer any clarification questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Questions or comments? I think we're good then. Oh, sorry.
I don't remember ever doing this on another building. Is this something that happens on every building and sometimes they match up and sometimes they don't? Or they've always matched up except for the as-built?
Gary Fuller, Acting Planning Director. This building was built inches off, and so they're, trying to correct that by vacating and then reestablishing it in the right place. So we do get variations, I know, on the Byron. There was a slight height thing at the end, but, due to final engineering sometimes, but this is a little unusual, yes, but it's very minor, and so due to final engineering, in this case, the building location being inches off, they're making this adjustment. So this is a little unusual, to answer your question, but I've seen, other things like this in the past, and I'm sure in the industry, this happens on occasion, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Justine?
Madam Mayor, just a quick question. Let me just, for record purposes, so we're not talking about any degradation of safety here, is that right? Let me have that confirmation.
That's correct. There's no change to there will be no physical changes to the pedestrian accessibility on the sidewalk. It's just, it's very, very minor, a change of inches, basically at each, in the exhibit you can see. So a total of 41 square feet of changes. Sure.
Okay, so the 41 square feet, does that mean that's 41 square feet of sidewalk that doesn't exist? Or tell me more about the 41 square feet. What's the issue here? What?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Councilman. Councilmember,
thank you.
Yeah, so what happened here basically was the as-built engineering plans showed that a portion of the brick from the facade encroached ever so slightly into the existing easement, which means the actually easement as built and as people are using tonight, that's not going to change whatsoever as a result of this vacation. And the 41 square foot difference is simply just the difference between what was approved as part of the site plan and what was actually constructed. So what you all are looking at tonight is just simply papering over the existing sidewalk easement and rectifying the difference between what was previously approved and what has actually been built.
So we're not talking about less sidewalk than we thought we were getting, is that right?
So yeah, I mean, it's 41 square feet across much of the building face on Broad and Washington, and in most locations, it's actually in one of the exhibits we have here. It's just an inch here, it's an inch there. It's really, really small, but it's the difference between what was initially approved and what was actually built at the end of the day is 41 square feet.
And so, yes, there's, in sum total, 41 square feet less sidewalk than was approved. It's just that the configuration of that is in minor inches along a very long wall front.
I guess for context, it'd be helpful on how much sidewalk square footage is there? To put in context, 41, I'm guessing it's like point whatever percent, but that would be helpful to understand that.
I mean, my basic approach is we don't give away anything that the city owns except in return for something from the developer. So I'll just put that on the table as my preference, but I certainly understand why we want to try to resolve this. I'll just put on the table my preference for something coming back to the city as a result of that, of the give back of the 41 square feet. But again, I think you're right, Mayor, that in the grand scheme of things, it's not large, for sure. Thank you.
Justine?
So from the curb to the facade of the building, is that property owned by the city, or is that property owned by the realtor or the real estate company? Who owns that land?
The city.
So that is city-owned land, and so this would be, I guess, oh, no,
It
it's
is
not.
not
city-
owned by the city.
I'm sorry, the sidewalk?
Well, so from the sidewalk, from the curb to the, I guess, brick of the building, is that,
It's owned by Insight,
it's owned by Insight?
and we have an easement over it for public passage.
Okay, great. So this was basically, I guess, Insight building slightly more into the easement that had existed for the city.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay,
So we lost a little bit of public passage space.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. So if we, let's say, I don't know, 100 years in the future, this building comes down, if we grant this, then we're not giving up the full easement in the future if another building were to be built there.
That's right. If the easement, the way they're requesting it to look, the way it kind of looks now with the sidewalk, that would remain. The easement runs with the land, and it would be in place in perpetuity.
Oh, so, wait, so what we would grant now would be in place in perpetuity?
Yes.
And so if another building were to
That's
go
right.
there, we would still have lost the 41 square feet.
That's right.
I guess forever.
Unless we renegotiated in the future.
Yeah, the 41
Like
square
if
feet
this
back.
building were just raised to the ground, we would always have the sidewalk that you see now. We could negotiate for more sidewalk, but we wouldn't get less sidewalk.
So if they were to do a by right project there in 150 years, they would have the 41 square feet would be
There's
to do
the
stuff with.
private.
Is
yeah.
there a way to write this such that we don't give up that 41 square feet in the future if a new project were to come?
The only thing I would say is, every project that we do, we have so many concessions that we require of the developer, and that included greatly expanding the sidewalk than compared to what used to be there, and building everything that you see there, all the sidewalk, all the street furniture. And so that's pretty normal for the redevelopment process. So given the scale of the value of those concessions versus this 40 feet, I don't think it's worth it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, let me just follow up. I would ask the developer to think about what a value equivalent to the 41 square feet they're willing to contribute to the city before this comes back to us. It's a request. I recognize in the grand scheme of things, it's not large, but it would be very helpful if the developer were to do that. And that's where I'd end my thoughts tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Any final comments?
I'd just say that I am not interested in any contribution from the developer.
I guess I'll just say what would help me understand the request is, again, the percentage of 41 square feet versus how much sidewalk frontage there is, entire length of the project. And I'm guessing it's a lot. And I guess the second is what council should care about is the 20-foot the setback per our streetscape standards. And I guess we've deviated 19 point whatever in some places. Is that, we don't have 20
I would
feet?
defer to the planning staff. Do we?
If you look at the, I'm sorry, if you look at the exhibit though in the back, and it's really, really hard to see, and I know we worked, each of the sections, as Sally mentioned, are literally in inches. And so when you look at it, the setbacks are still, probably on average, still 20 feet from the front of the building.
Because that's what I would care about, is that
Yeah.
our policy is 20 feet setback
Correct.
on the main building, on a main road. And so if we're accomplishing that, not concerned about 41 square feet, because the public good that we want is that wide setback.
I think I would venture to, I mean, I've been out there a lot measuring things. But I would venture to say that this is, when I was out there looking at it the other day, that this is really like the brick architecture, like kind of jutting out and things like that. When I was going out there, it's such a minor difference as opposed to
Actually losing pedestrian
actually
width,
losing
okay.
pedestrian frontage.
Got it.
It's very negligible of a difference when you go out there.
Thank you for that extra context.
Can I also just ask, so this is your application of us because our easement otherwise runs into the front of your building? Okay, got it. That's
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah,
like,
we-
we, if we were like, we are claiming X of our easement, you would potentially like have to shave off
Off
the
your
front
facade.
pieces of
Yeah,
some of
the
the
crux
building.
of the issue is that some of the building face encroaches into the existing easement.
Yeah, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Just quick, when you say inches, like, do you mean like 2 inches, or are you talking about 6 or 7 inches, or like 10 inches? I don't know, like, inches could mean a lot of different things.
If you go to the, Taya, if you wouldn't mind, I have an exhibit in the report, it's not the best. Or on the, it's sheet 3, but there's like a 4-foot stretch, and then the width is 0.46 inches. So you have like a 4-foot wide stretch, and then the width is like 0.46
Oh,
inches.
so less than an inch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're talking about these very thin, like half.
Little
of a
half-inch
foot.
strips along the
Okay.
facade that,
Okay.
Right, so that's how you get to, and there's. Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. There's like 15 with a half inch, there's 9.5 with 0.14 inches. So you're talking about, that's what I'm saying, it's literally like
Yeah.
the brick of the architecture, like sticking out a little bit for,
Okay.
articulation.
Gotcha.
So.
and they just never.
And that's why it was so hard to make it visible.
Again, I think what we should care about is, again, the 20-foot setback, which is a policy we've
Right.
espoused in the streetscapes. I'm hearing staff say we largely are maintaining 20-foot setbacks through the facade of this building. Is that correct?
And there, yes, and there's a tabulation too. They talk about +1, -1, +1, like the difference in the change. But yes, in the articulation, and when I was out there, if you go kind of measure an average, you would probably see the average of 20 feet along the street frontage. Yeah.
Okay.
It's maintained.
Okay. Any final thoughts? Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready for it next week.
All right, thank you, council. So the next item is a request that the council consider an amendment to the city code that will extend to our public safety aides the existing authority granted to law enforcement officers for parking enforcement, abandoned vehicle response, and traffic control. Public safety aides, we have been shifting our crossing guard function to be public safety aides so they can do a wider range of responsibilities for the city. I think this has provided great value for the taxpayers and has been a big help to our police department. And so that is the request. The request specifically is to have a discussion about this and then to schedule first reading on this ordinance at your next meeting on July 14th. I do want to thank the city attorney's office and Maria Rojas in the city attorney's office who worked with the police department to develop this code amendment. I don't know if the city attorney wants to add anything, but that's kind of the main gist of it.
That is the main gist of it. So the chapter that is proposed to be amended, it regulates motor vehicle licensing and registration, parking, towing, and traffic. And this proposed amendment would clarify that the police department may utilize unsworn civilian employees to perform some of those enforcement functions, including enforcing parking regulations, enforcing vehicle registration and licensing, and directing traffic when circumstances require. And currently, state code does allow these activities to be performed by non-law enforcement officers, but currently, Chapter 26 identifies only law enforcement officers as being as having these authorities. So that's the clarification to be made.
Can council members also do parking enforcement?
That's an interesting expansion of
You
the
could be
ordinance.
deputized.
Like every time there's a car double parked on Broad Street, holding
Yeah.
up the whole lane of traffic for the Uber delivery. Sorry.
Yeah. I will note in line 163 of the ordinance language, I see that I can make an improvement there by, it reads, it's subsection B, it says that public safety aides may enforce city regulations. I'd like to insert a sentence before that that says law enforcement officers may enforce all provisions of this chapter, and then additionally, public safety aides may do the following. And that way, it's not implying that law enforcement officers cannot do that function.
Okay. Questions or comments? Laura?
I mean, to me, this seems like a no-brainer. You know, it's, the city's growing, you know, being able to have PSAs handle some of this traffic, especially when there are signals out, because we're working at, you know, Modera Falls Church and what have you, to have, you know, that support for our police officers so that they can really handle the more serious crimes, I think is terrific. And I also think it would improve job satisfaction for the PSAs because now they have a little more authority. So I got to think that, I noticed somewhere that I think we're down 2. We have 1 right now, and I think they're going to hire 2 more, I believe. The chief's going to hire 2 more. So I think this would hopefully also help, you know, increase retention by having given these PSAs some actual authority. So I fully support this. Thanks.
Just going to go around the room.
Madam Mayor, just a couple quick questions. I mean, I agree with moving forward on this as well for the reasons that Laura mentioned a minute ago. My question goes to support for them. Will they be trained? Because traffic law enforcement sometimes can get pretty challenging. Will they be equipped with radios? So for example, if they start to cite someone for an expired plate, that can sometimes get pretty tense if that person is there. So what does the city plan to do to support the folks that we're giving this additional authority to?
So I will note that Claire Bradley is on the call as well, and invite Claire to respond to this.
Hi, good evening, Council. To your point, Councilman Snyder, yes, our PSAs do currently have radios. They are trained on how to use them. They know when to call for backup in the case of a situation where they feel like they need support by our sworn law enforcement. And they are trained in basic traffic safety measures, both from the Code of Virginia as well as some of the VDOT manual guidance when it comes to things like school crossing enforcement. That's heavily a VDOT measure, and we take a lot of guidance from them, from, you know, how to close the road, what sort of traffic signs that are needed. So your answer to both is yes, we do support them in these measures to support our sworn officers.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that even as we're asking them to do these things in the public interest, that we're supporting them. So it sounds like we are. Thanks very much.
Okay, Debbie.
My question was the same thing. I just want to confirm that we have budget appropriately to train them so they're comfortable doing the job with their new authority, and also agree with Laura, and hopefully it makes it a more interesting and job that this authority provides a desire to retain our staff longer, because that's been a tough role.
Any more, Justine?
Yeah, I also support this because this will help free up time from other police officers being able to do other duties. I also heard, but maybe Claire can correct me, that a lot of these public safety aides oftentimes get absorbed to do other functions, and maybe even what I would consider move up through the police force. And so this could also be a great place to get talent from as well.
Yeah, three of our current officers started as PSAs, including we had one that just graduated from the academy in December, and he's in field training right now. But we have two current officers that may be working right now on the street that started their career here in the City of Falls Church as a PSA. But agreed, could be a good entry level job for a lot of people. It could be a end of your law enforcement career for a lot of people, or some in between, but we want to give them options and we want to support them. We want the code to reflect what they're doing. So appreciate the council's consideration on this.
Final thoughts? I just have one. So I know that we also have police do snow removal enforcement of our ordinance. Should we ask our public safety aides to also have that authority? Is that something that needs to be written in?
I'll look into that. They aren't allowed to perform anything criminal or criminal consequences to it. It depends on how the lack of snow removals and, how that is.
Civil penalty.
But it must be civil, right? Yeah.
We might wish it was more severe.
Probably, and I can talk to the police about it before you see us next.
Because I think it's unfortunate that we have to enforce it, but when we do call our police officers, and so this is another one that we can share the responsibility. We get enough complaints during the few times it snows that people aren't shoveling their stretch of sidewalk, that maybe we should consider the public safety aides, because school's probably not in session then, if there's so much snow.
Yeah, and sometimes it is, what constitutes a misdemeanor can surprise you. So we'll look into it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, staff, on this one.
So we're then on to, thank you, we're now on to consent items, and I'll just note them very briefly, and we'll, if there are any questions, we'll take those back to staff and make sure that the staff report addresses those questions before they're on the agenda, on the consent agenda for your next meeting on July 14th. So there are two endorsements for grant applications on the consent calendar preview. One is for a grant to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for $15 million for a shared use path that would connect the existing Shreve Road project, which is under design right now, and have it extend up past Mustang Alley on Haycock Road and into Fairfax County. We would envision that we would keep the partnership that we have with Fairfax County, and that Fairfax County might administer this project for the city as well. I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but since they're doing the Shreve Road project, we think that could make good sense. And then it would extend into the county past Mustang Alley. The other one is for intersection improvements at the intersection of Annandale and Hillwood. That's an intersection that has not had attention. And we also have, the signals are hung by a span wire, and so we would do a redesign of that intersection, make it more walkable, and also put in the Falls Church branded signal.
So this is the one that I flagged that I think that we're applying for MPTA money in FY '31.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's what the MBTA cycle is, but Debbie will make fun of me, but I run through both of these intersections. They are actually very high PED traffic intersections, and they're one of our worst because they don't have PED heads on, there's like one PED head on one leg of it. I think this is one where we had like a down intersection, like lights for a while. We had a temporary one set up.
That's right.
Are there interim options? Like, I don't love having to wait till FY '31 to start projects here.
So unfortunately, both of them are kind of out there on the back end of this. Let me get back with you on interim solutions, and we could have that discussion. We do think that, so staff's view in terms of priorities, we would prioritize that safe routes to school as a major project. And so we'd like council feedback. If you disagree with that, we'd want to know that, but I think that's the prioritization between the two. And then we can get back with you on other interim solutions.
Okay, I have two just sort of bigger picture questions. So is this common that we would submit two grant applications in the same cycle like this?
It's two pretty big dollar amount applications, and so we might need to be prepared. Well, we're going to fight for both of them.
Okay,
But the
but the
MBTA might come
secondary
to some
route
different
would take
judgments. Yes.
priority. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me just because it's also a continuation of what's already happening with the Shreve Road portion, right? So we're just extending it. And obviously, that's one of the big things we've all talked about is safety for our students to bike to the high school and the middle school. So I would support that. If we had to choose one or the other, I would support that. My other big, just sort of general question was, so on the second one, that intersection, is that like right at the edge of Falls Church? Like where does it become Fairfax? Just if you cross Hillward, if you keep going? Yeah,
So
it's
basically-
like right there, right? That's
No,
the
it's
cor-
a, it's a little ways up.
Oh, is it a little ways up?
Yeah,
Okay.
Art and Frame is there, and
Oh,
then
that's
it
right,
turns
okay.
So if
Okay,
you
so
think
it's a
of
little-
the sort of the backside of Art and Frame, it's
Got it. Okay, thank you.
It's actually 2 intersections, so I don't know if, do you have that staff report handy to you?
Oh, is it also the intersection of Washington and?
It's two intersections on
Annandale.
Annandale, both of which
East
need
Fairfax, yeah.
need
I hate that
attention.
intersection. Yeah, yeah,
Where we pick
I
up
think-
trash and see lots of,
yeah.
Harry added a graphic to the second or third page that shows you,
Sort of where like the Dunkin' Donuts is and that, yeah.
that's correct.
yeah.
It's that stretch
Yeah.
of street. There was one other staff report. So there you go, perfect.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So do they, does both the shared use path on Haycock and this one compete against each other? Because that one would start FY '27 and this one wouldn't start till FY '31. Do we know?
correct. Carrie's kind of read, our staff's kind of read on this is that, where NVTA is at with kind of resources that, it's potential that we could qualify for 2 projects. So that's why we've
We wouldn't necessarily have
submitted
to
2.
pick. We think we could potentially go for both?
That's
Yeah.
what staff is proposing, yes.
And from an MBTA perspective, because we didn't do a couple rounds because of workload and resources and timing of projects, we now have our 10-year long-term life benefit of value capacity that we can tap into. Also, MBTA happens to have a lot of money right now because until the current economic changes, the investment income, as you all are familiar with, was significant. So they actually have money out there that makes it potential for us to get to large dollar amounts this time. We do need to prioritize, and we still have to compete and get through all the criteria, but it's definitely worth putting the 2 in, given the identified needs. And these are good regional ones because we are connecting into Fairfax County on different ends of the city.
So Greening and Lincoln would not be a good candidate for NVTA money here.
Correct, it will not meet the regional criteria on congestion and their other criteria.
Okay. And when do we need public comment? Because I know we've had good track record of getting public comment to NVTA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll, hi, so yeah, I think we should go for 2, and, I'll check with Cindy on when the discussion is actually gonna come up, when the period is open for that public comment. But you're right, and Letty, you've been very helpful getting public comments in the past. And we'll go back to both NVTC and NVTA to see if there's anything that's, possibly available for the Lincoln Avenue work. And then finally, not directly related to this, but on Annandale Road, the traffic circle project, is there any current status of that? And we want to make sure that everyone in that area knows that it's happening so they're not surprised by it. And I know that it's been some months since that's been discussed publicly. And I know it's not either of these projects, but I thought since we're talking about Annandale Road, Wyatt, anything new on that project, the traffic circle?
So we'll have to follow up, Mr. Snyder, with an update to you. I know the team has engaged with the communications office on a communication plan, but I don't have a specific date to share with you this evening.
Okay, well, it's important in that plan to emphasize the safety elements because it is a change, and change, as we know, can sometimes cause legitimate concern. So we want to make sure to the extent we can, there isn't surprise about that.
Understood.
Thanks.
Okay, back to the.
And I would just say, just like Mayor, you've done so great in the past, if, we can get, and Ms. Connolly can help us get the word out to the school community to advocate for that funding to get safely to safe school biking route to the secondary campus.
Yep.
Justine.
When we're putting into grant applications, I guess we wouldn't necessarily say that we have a preference for one or the other, or would they consider that we have a prioritization list for getting these done?
MBTA will ask which is our priority.
Okay, so they will consider
label it
that.
1 and 2, so that's why Mr. Shields raised the point to confirm that you concur with staff's recommendation of which one is first.
Okay,
Just in case the scoring rolls out that we can't get both.
gotcha, great.
I think we've talked about the shared use path as being the most competitive of the two. So that's part of the reason we've kind of put that on the front end.
Okay, other consent items, Wyatt?
There's 2 more. One is to sign an amendment between the city and Fairfax County for our family services contract and our health services contract. Currently, they're under 2 different agreements. The MOA will merge them into one agreement, make it easier to track them, and that's the main reason for it.
So my question on that was, the staff report wasn't clear whether there's any changes. I assume that there are no changes. We're really just merging 2 documents together.
Yeah, that's the case, that basically we're taking the terms from one agreement and adding it to the other so that it's in one agreement. The costs are determined by formula, and so those, you get more data in terms of your usage, and then that's how the city is billed for it, and that's why the cost implications are not totally nailed down for FY26 at the moment.
Debbie?
If those are, I know this is a consent agenda item, it's a cleanup of particular contracts, but it does raise 2nd, 3rd, 4th level questions about, for me, about what services we actually use, like how often, like what's covered under there, how many residents do we have using the services, how much are we spending versus we're receiving, like I just really don't have a grasp on that. And if this contract has another year on it, we have a year to then do some of that data collection and understand better what services we're receiving, and are we maximizing, are we paying our fair share, all those questions that aren't on this consent agenda, but it did raise a lot of them in my mind, and I think we should spend the next year reviewing that before we get to contract renegotiation or re-upping, and just to make sure we understand that and we budget accordingly, and make sure we're doing the best for all of our citizens here who use all those services. Because one thing that crosses over is the homelessness challenge that we have. Like, we receive homelessness services from Fairfax County, but we're on the criminal justice board in Arlington County because we get our court services from that side. So homelessness is one of those issues that actually goes across multiple contracts, and how we are discussing it and how we are supporting those who are in need. So all that to say, if we could put on our calendar over the next year discussion of that, and that gives housing staff time to really analyze what we've been spending and using and how it meets the needs that we actually have.
Be great, like, joint work session with HSAC. 'Cause I vaguely remember the last one we had was when we were in the community center, because City Hall was under renovation. I think we had someone from Department of Family
CSB.
Services.
That's the CSB.
Or CSB. But we sent, like, we all got this overview of what CSB offers, and we had no idea, and it was really eye-opening. So that must have been 2019 at this point. So before we negotiate a big contract, probably good to get an overview of the services, actual utilization in the city.
And to know how they're changing. We know that CDBG grants and other things are shifting this federal fiscal year. So how does that impact services we can provide, what we have to pay? I mean, there are a lot of subsets to that.
Mary Beth?
And I don't know if this one is for Ms. Jones or Ms. Gillette, but the schools also work with Fairfax County on public health. Is that included in this contract? Is it also schools, or is this just general government services? And do the schools have a separate contract?
I'll confirm, but I do not believe this included schools, but let me check.
And I'll note Dana's online and has her hand raised.
Oh, good.
Hi, I was just going to say that some of the school services are included. And I was also going to say that if you look in your budget book for FY '26, it has the numbers of usage for all those services that we used in the past year. So you can get, an idea of what kind of usage we are actually getting. It's all listed in the budget book. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So does this count, is the CSB part of this, or is that something else?
The CSB is a separate contract.
Separate contract, so this is just
Yes.
public health?
This is only talking about family services and public health.
Okay.
And then if you look in the staff report, it lists all of the services that are included. Yes, so you can see Department of Family Services includes all of these services here. Aging services, children and youth family services, childcare services, like if there are childcare, people are operating childcares in their home, the licensing that they get, employment services, all of those things are included in public assistance, food stamps, all of that type of thing is in DFS. And in the health department, they're the ones, if you remember when we had COVID, they were the ones that came on site and did testing and, vaccinations and that type of thing. So you can see all of the services are here.
So, not to muddy the waters anymore, but CSB and CSA are mental health services, right?
CSB is mental health
Mental
services.
health.
That's exactly
Okay.
correct. And CSA is dealing with the schools.
When these contracts are negotiated, it's the costs that they're charging us generally at cost. So they're trying to make some sort of calculation to determine like what share we're using, and then they charge us just a proportion of what it costs them, or how are these?
Basically, but it also includes the population. It's based on population.
Okay. And so if it turns out for like a 5-year period, we have a large population, but we don't use the services, does that change the number or amount that we pay? Because I know that the juvenile justice or juvenile detention center, it changes how much we pay, our usage.
Yeah, it's based, so the health department contract is based on population percentage. So, for example, like we could have a year when no one has to use a service, and then the next year they do. You know what I mean? So that's why it's based on the population percentage. But some of our contracts are based on actual usage. I mean, we have several contracts with Fairfax County, and they're all based, calculated in different ways, depending on the contract.
Thank you.
I just had a fiscal question. So the fiscal impact said that no additional funds are expected and that the fiscal year 2025 was 620,705, which I guess is what we had budgeted. And then this is just formally merging the documents, but this doesn't come to us in the form of any sort of budget amendment, because there were earlier documents that were like at 576 or something versus 620. But my larger question was, I noticed that the funds get paid out of the general fund, the stormwater fund, and the school operating budgets. And I had a question about,
It should be just the general fund.
okay, so it doesn't, the utility fund is in here. I didn't know if it was like a public health implication
Yeah.
with the stormwater fund,
I think
but like
we were
it
just
seemed
being very
odd.
formal in our
Okay.
giving the full title of the budget, but it's
Okay.
it's paid out of the general fund.
Got it, okay, thank you.
If you give us long enough, we'll come up with a theory.
I read that too, and I was like, but I thought, I'm the new kid, I'm not going to ask.
That's right, and that's our standard request for authorization for this contract. We do every year, and so it is fairly self-explanatory. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it, but we use it to purchase our electronic, or e-books and other electronic materials.
Any final comments on consent? We still have a closed session.
I have one, and that is just, as I look at this one, I'm pleased to see that mentioned in the staff report is that Meridian High School has direct access to Overdrive hosted digital collection. Because that's one of those things we've asked about over the years is there any sharing going on? And it's nice to see there is.
Interesting.
I have a quick council question / request. Should we do that after we come back from the?
Well, why don't we do it now? And then when we're in closed session, we just go home.
Mayor, are we going to do the council schedule?
Depends on how quickly we get out. Or do you want to do schedule and then we go into closed session later?
It doesn't matter.
As the agenda saying schedule and then closed session.
Oh, yeah, it does say that.
Want to do schedule or we want to save it to Wednesday? We do have breakfast with staff on Wednesday.
But my only thought is the breakfast, well, it doesn't matter, but the breakfast starts at 10, so that's sort of, we would end at 9 and then just hang around for an hour. That was my only thought.
It's a good point to do the schedule tonight.
Yeah.
Schedule tonight then, I guess. Let me pull up the schedule, please, Taya. It's really cold in here.
A blanket.
I do have one already. Okay. I know last week Wyatt had shared kind of a more fleshed out schedule for the rest of the year, and I had asked everyone to go back to kind of council priorities that we had laid out for 2024, 2025 to see if there were major things missing. So before we go into the weekly schedule, I guess I'll open up to council to see whether you all have any big chunks of priorities that we wanted to get done, or whether we just want to talk through the schedule.
And I hadn't taken time to update the schedule after the mayor's meeting last Wednesday, so there are some more updates that we'll need to make. For instance, the September 15th, we will hold that work session, so we're crossed out the word cancel, and we're planning to have the ULI TAP presentation. We've got a couple other things that we would put on the agenda for that night. We would cancel the meeting on September 22nd, which is Rosh Hashanah. And we also were going to make some adjustments. October 14th, we were going to cancel that meeting because that's VML conference, and but keep the other 3 meetings in October. So
And then cancel November 3rd, because that was the one before the election.
that's right.
While we have also Sally here, I think the main thing we wanted to get in the schedule for this summer is scheduling closed session on Pearson, and the status of
That's correct.
Pearson.
I can tell you that July 28th is the next hearing date for that. The city filed a demur, and the hearing on that will be Friday. I'm sorry, that's not a Friday. July 28th. What is that day of the week? It's Tuesday?
July 28th is a Monday.
Monday. Okay, thank you. And I don't know if we'll get a decision on Monday from the judge, but that's when the hearing will occur. And once we get a decision from that hearing, it would be a good time to reconvene and have a discussion.
Before or after the hearing?
Well, if you wish, we can meet I guess I'd prefer to meet after the hearing, because I might have information just in some shape or form. But also, we should meet after we get a decision.
So either August 4th or August 11th? Is that?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. If we could pencil that in, I guess either one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Is everyone here for both of those August meetings?
I am. I'm hoping to be on vacation the August 18th or 19th that week.
Okay. Okay. So if we can add that closed session on Pearson.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Why, were there other big changes from last week?
And I apologize. I had a ton of notes on this to plug in things, but
You got most of them.
I have my
The big-
notes from that last discussion.
Can we include, I think I braced this, but if I didn't raise it last week, on one of the minor to be scheduled, can we put that stormwater fee credit conversation somewhere?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
One other note, October 6th, we could have the year-end financial report. And we typically look at that with the Budget and Finance Committee beforehand. September 19th is kind of far in advance of the 16th, so I'll follow up with the Budget and Finance Committee, but we might want to reschedule that to September 26th instead of September 19th.
I won't be here September 26th, but
Oh,
someone else
that's a
can
problem.
lead the meeting.
Are you recommending the 26th so that we can get close to the year-end report?
That's right. The year-end report, you know, we won't have it by September 19th. That's the issue there.
I can't. But if there are two other members who can be there, it certainly can run without me.
I was suggesting the 26th. One other option is to do it right before the October 6th meeting, so the Friday, I think that would be October 3rd.
I also cannot do that.
Okay. October 3rd is probably best for staff, and, yeah. Yeah, that would be a Friday. That's right.
Okay. Anything to highlight for the summer schedule without looking far out?
So the summer, that August cycle,
Solid waste.
yeah, solid waste is sort of the main one. And so, but also affordable living policy. We're I think we're feeling optimistic that a lot of good work has gone into that, and so that should be a pretty smooth landing on affordable living policy. But that would be the other headline for the August 4th and August 11th meeting.
Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing other major input or schedule issues. Okay, so sounds like we'll cancel Wednesday morning. Everyone can sleep in and then come to breakfast. And the reason why we're starting breakfast at 10, I think, is because the library doesn't open till 10, and we wanted to rotate locations, and we had not hit the library yet, so we're doing it to have it at the library. And the next one is going to be, for your schedule, October 8th. I think Celeste was sending it out as a calendar invite. Is it on there already?
It's on the calendar, yeah.
But she's going to send out as like an extra, like through the calendar and Outlook.
And one other reminder, we're going to meet with residents of Cameron and Sharrow tomorrow night at 6 p.m. on site to discuss the demolition of the homes, but also to discuss the larger plan for a connected Cavalier Trail. And I don't recall, Taya, would you know if we publicly noticed that meeting? I think we did not. And so if there are council members that would like to attend, if you could let me know in advance, just so we can avoid a meeting of the city council.
When is the meeting?
6 p.m. tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'd like to attend.
I have a housing at 6:30, so most I'd be there half an hour.
I would attend as a neighbor there.
Okay. That would,
Okay, so it looks like Ms. Connolly and myself can attend.
that sounds good.
I'm not sure we'll go early and I'll come pop in.
The council. Each other, we can show up, right? I think we all show up, it's fine, as long as we don't talk to each other.
I don't know.
What's the rule?
We're talking city business. I mean, that's the purpose of the meeting, so I think it would be,
We shouldn't show up.
I
We
think
should
that's
not
it.
all be there, no.
Yeah.
Mr. Shields, there was an invite, or maybe this is to everybody else, from Fairfax Water for the ribbon cutting of their new facility next Monday afternoon, I believe. Is anyone attending that?
Go, so I think I CC'd Wyatt or in the mailbox and asked the invite to be shared.
So we'll spread the word. Those are great events to go to.
Right.
It's great to be in good contact with Fairfax Water. So I'd recommend if people can, it is always worthwhile. We had good attendance at the Charles Murray Operations Center, which is very close to the city, and that's what serves the city. So that was an important event. That was probably, 2 years ago. And then I think they've had other sort of
Oh, this
events.
one's in Chantilly.
This is Chantilly.
Yeah, this one I was planning not to go to because it is a little further afield.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, just in terms of sort of the people that you'll see working on the street, I think they're serving a different part of the service territory.
Okay. Other schedule or council requests?
I just had questions. So the W&OD intersections got repaved. Are they still in the process of, are we gonna get the stamped brick there, or what's that
I
timeline?
believe that is the plan there. Stamped brick, is that right, Andy? At the W&OD crossings? We'll get back with you on the final
It's
design.
like black with white lines right now.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
curious as to what the process or plan was. And then I was also wondering, maybe this could be just part of the council, weekly council follow-up, are we planning to apply for NVTC funding for this year for?
Toll revenue?
For what?
For the toll revenue?
Yeah,
Is
the
that-
toll revenue stuff. Are we planning to do anything for that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know it's come up before.
Yeah,
but,
I was just curious if we're planning to apply this year. They offered to help make sure that our applications are strong.
Yeah.
We've
Can I just
started
go
in-
back to the W&OD intersections? Because I don't know, I mean, I don't want to speak for other people, but I would say that I think we'd all be pretty disappointed if in remediating the trail crossings, they just were left as black asphalt. So my expectation is that more is being done there to remediate poor work than how they currently look, because I don't think it's satisfactory.
Yeah, I figured that it was just a temporary, but yeah, I guess I wanted to follow up to find out.
We'll include it in the council request so everybody gets involved, and on the MVTC grant, we've started an internal conversation. Carrie's initiating that. So more to come.
Okay. I had a council request. I think I had asked about this back in May, but I was actually just asked about it again tonight about the status of the post office. And while Dana is here, and I know that we've been trying to tackle the unhoused population issue, I get probably a question about this every 2 weeks. So it does seem like a community service that people really like, being able to access the post office after hours. And so I don't know what actions are possible or solutions there are, but I think Laura also sent something in. So I'm guessing other council members field this as well. I don't need to put you on the spot. I just figured I would mention.
Why don't we follow up with the USPS and get back with council?
Yeah, I think it was discussed at Human Services Advisory Council, and I think the point was that that same notice has been up there now for several months, and it makes it's sort of implying that the city's not doing any, it's sort of like, we're waiting on city officials, so I think Human Services was sort of like, hey, it's not making the city look great. So, because I know we've been trying to work with them, so we might just want to, but I think you're right. But the other thing that the council brought up is that people who work full-time, how do they access their mailboxes when it's closed after hours, so.
It's closed Sundays and after hours now, so you can't go into the lobby even just to mail something.
I guess one more question I have is Dominion Power, and we continue to have outages that affect our businesses and our city core service areas. So is there anything new on that?
On the core one, that will give us redundancy to City Hall and about 350 accounts. That's between here and North Washington. We do have that project still progressing concurrent with Park Avenue, Great Street, because we need the conduits. So I've been working with our new Public Works Director to see if we could move that along so that Dominion then moves along.
Yes, please.
So that's on the big issue. And then, of course, we're continuing to work to make sure we refine our escalation and the response when we have vehicles taking down poles. A lot of the projects that you talked about tonight with undergrounding and other CIP projects will certainly help as well. But the big one for the redundancy is still being pushed.
Yeah, and that would impact the business areas as well, or just the city?
No, it would do from basically the library over to the Sunrise side of North Washington, so it would get all the 350 residential and business accounts
Yep.
in that kind
Okay.
of area.
Yep, thanks.
It also
to
would
piggyback on-
benefit people between City Hall to Broad, because then we'd have a redundant path the other way too.
You were just going to piggyback on whether the Dominion delay is still impacting traffic signals over at West Falls, or has that been resolved? And I haven't run by there lately, so I don't know.
They're not live. There's lots of poles, though. There's like the new poles are up and the old poles are up.
Last,
bunch of them are
my
bad.
understanding was that the work had been done by the developers and by the city, and that Dominion was still the stopping
Dominion and VDOT, I
point.
think.
We can double check with staff, but last week the traffic and lanes were all closed down as the new poles were being delivered and offloaded.
That would be great in that
Check with Lionel.
update. Thank you.
I had a quick question. It's more just nature of council request. Do you, in the, weekly email, I know staff's aware of it because I've seen them looking at this, but what is happening with the big, bricks, the wet spot on the brick outside the community center where there's seemingly just a constant stream of water out of a wall? There's it's like a big wet patch on the brick.
Are you
And
looking like at the front of the building?
When you
to
look at the
right?
front of the building, it's to the right of where all the new piping is, and there are like those silver little fixtures that are on the front of the building, and the water is just like streaming out of it 24/7, and there's a the brick is just wet, and so the water is just like sitting on the brick foundation constantly now.
I believe as part of the punch list and the issue
Yeah.
that's still being resolved, but I just looked at Andy. We'll have to follow up with
Okay.
Lionel.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's just going to create, obviously problems for the building if it's left like that. Thanks.
I just want to say thanks to Public Works. There was a major tree that was down on Timber Lane and Poplar yesterday, which is not a storm, and I think that whole neighborhood lost power for about 12 hours. So when I was walking the dog at midnight, they were still out there, and this morning at 7 a.m., they were still out there. Ideally, they weren't working 7 hours, but I realized lots of people were called in to work on that, so thank you.
And that was an example of the Public Works response, the work order going into Dominion, and a quick Dominion response.
It's a big tree. Okay. We ready to go into closed session now? Okay.
Wait,
we are going.
Mayor, before you do that, there was a question raised about council attending a meeting. At least the FOIA council's guidance is if you don't speak and you don't participate and communicate in other nonverbal ways, that would not constitute a meeting. So if you can find a way to attend but not engage, that would be permissible. It's just difficult.
We're just not going to make eye contact. We're both neighbors to the project, so, okay. Okay. I'm going to read the closed session motion. Upon a motion made by,
Downs.
seconded by,
Underhill.
and passed by a vote of City Council, council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-37116 for discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interest of the governmental unit would be adversely affected, and Virginia Code 2.2-37113 for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. Specifically, this is for acquiring property for the purpose of affordable housing. Councilmember Connolly.
Yes.
Downs.
Yes.
Flynn.
Yes.
Johnson Scott.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yeah.
Underhill.
Yes.
Hardy. Yes. Okay, we're going to go in at 10:05. Go to the Oak Room and then call Dave from there.
Yeah, will there be a
Correct.
separate Teams meeting for the closed session? Okay.
Okay,
So
well,
Can I-
Taya's
can I
gonna
get
come with
invited to
us
that
and we'll.
separate as well, so I can share my screen? Could I get invited to that room as well, so that I can share my screen?
Yep. When we forward invite, then Mr. Shields will be able
Hey, Tia, I never got a separate link for the closed session. Huh.
Okay, we're coming back into open session, so it is 10:48 PM upon a motion made by
Underhill.
Underhill and seconded by
Connolly?
Connolly and passed by vote of City Council. Council reconvene in open session. Connolly?
Yes.
Downs?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Francisca?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Underhill?
Yes.
Hardy, yes. And that's a certification. Upon a motion made by
Connolly?
and seconded by
Downs.
and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting, closed session or meeting by the body. Connolly?
Yes.
Downs?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Francisca?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Underhill?
Yes.
Hardy, yes. Okay. And then we also have a motion coming out of the work session.
I move to authorize the city manager to execute council's direction per the July 7th, 2025 closed session regarding the investment of public funds in acquisition of real property for the purpose of affordable housing.
We have a second?
Second.
Connolly on the second. And we
Ms.
call,
Ms. Connolly?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Ms. John Scott, yes. Mayor Hardy?
yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wyatt. Do we have any other business? Okay, otherwise we're adjourned. See
All right, thank you, council. Have a good night.
you next week.